Ah. Peace to the east, the west, to the north, and the south. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Night Gate. That was L'âme, je veux chanter pour sûr. It's a beautiful song. Our wonderful guest, that was one of her choices tonight for the song. I love this song. It's like a nice little retro French song, and it speaks to the heart, literally. So, welcome for joining the show. We're back once again for a power-packed evening of some amazing intel this evening. What I wanted to say is big up to those who joined in for the live earlier. We were discussing some of the nature of, some of the patriarchal system that is causing a lot of upheaval in the pseudo-conscious community. Big up to those who really sent them some resources and some aid to really assist those who are going through going through some of the humps and hurdles of trying to, basically finagle yourself through a system that has been covertly overtaken by, like Kiki would say, by the AI. So anyway, joining in today, we're going to have a masterful discussion. This is a wonderful discussion for mothers, especially caretakers, anyone who is a facilitator in school. This is a conversation that I think you would really appreciate. We speak to the hearts and souls of children all the time, especially we liken to many of the souls of new children coming in as the star seeds. And with them coming in, there has always been a agenda to try to, to basically handle or to drive these star seeds in a lower form, trying to sidebar their consciousness, trying to hinder their spiritual aptitude by chemicalizing them, by forced vaccinations, by basically sending, GMO foods into every aspect of our nutritional, locations to basically try to incept on mostly and affect the children. But with these beautiful new star seeds, they come with wonderful mothers and facilitators that are already up on the intel. So this is what the show is definitely going to be on today. And I wanted to give a wonderful shout out to our amazing guest tonight. And many of you know, she's one of our own sea stars who's on. She actually lives in Arizona. A lot of times, if I talk about intel from Arizona, I get it from our wonderful sea star. So let me give you an introduction of her so you get an idea for those who are just joining us for this new conversation via, some of you are joining me via Blog Talk. So you're not necessarily on Cypher. But it's the Cypher crew who's in the house, and also to Patreon who's joining us this evening for this conversation. Okay, so we're going to talk about food, chemicals, vaccines, autism, and awareness. Okay, power pack. I'm gonna give a introduction to our fabulous guest Gail, aka Kajal. Kaja. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Gail. Okay, this is a mom of 3 children. She has a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 8-year-old. She wrote a book called Rainbow Food Rocks for her daughter Abigail, which is focused on wheat, dairy, corn, soy, egg, chemical, and meat-free recipes for parents like herself who have been on the healing journey with children with autism, ADHD, and have misunderstood autism and ADHD. Abigail created the book, title, and painted the logo. I love this. This is amazing. So we're going to discuss chemicalization of children, also the big push. She's got a lot of gems tonight. I really would suggest that you take down notes. I mean, this is something that we talk about often, but we need to speak more specific about the things that are basically covertly affecting the children. And it is obviously something that has been governmentally stimulated, because if they know that these beautiful new souls are coming on the planet, it would make sense that they would intend to try to incept and to basically cause ripples in the conscious waves of, and especially the heightened conscious waves that are coming on the planet via these children and via the parents, the vessels that these children were ushered onto this earth through. So, I want to kind of check in everything. Now, tonight, this is a discussion. I suggest if you're definitely ready for the discussion, and you would ask questions during the later part of our show, which The later part of our tier, we do Q&A afterwards. If you have questions, I would suggest you take notes. This is going to be a highly informative show. I suggest you call in earlier, and the number is 515-605-9881. Again, 515-605-9881. And we jump online, so there's a new call-in number as well. So you can call that call-in number, or you can call 646-787-8311. I suggest you call in earlier if you have questions. A lot of times it goes so quickly when we're getting so into the zone of information that when that last hour comes about, that bonus hour, we're not on live stream and you won't be able to call in and ask a question. Okay, so I just give you that opportunity now. I see that we have Gail is already in. So no further ado, let's bring in our wonderful guests. We have a lot to discuss. And some of this information will just basically be very disheartening to hear that there are things that are being purposefully set out into the populace via the food, the nutritional staples that you have in your household to cause, disruption, synapsis-wise to your children and to yourself. And we'll talk about that this evening. So I see that Gail's in. Let me just connect everything, make sure we get a great connection. Hold on one moment. Okay, Gail, I see you in the queue. I'm going to pull you in. Okay. Okay. All right, hopefully there isn't any static on your side. Maybe a little static here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pull Gail in. I see you in here at the queue. Gail?
Okay, hi, FleurBrun. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh my gosh.
Really, really exciting.
Thank you for coming on. Peace, Goddess, peace. You have a lot of gems tonight. I was going over the notes. I was going over the notes again. I'm excited because this is Mom. This is what we need to hear. We need all the information to help us be empowered in a world that is creating injustice, especially for our little ones, via the food, via the.
And that's why I'm on here.
I love it. I love it. So how are you this evening?
I'm well. I've had a busy week. I've been meeting a lot of people and talking and gathering a lot of information. And I hope people have pens and pencils. This way they can write a lot down. I'm really trying to reach out to a lot of moms and parents. And in talking to a lot of people, I realized a lot of people aren't aware of a lot of things that I've become aware of. And like you already mentioned, I'm going to go over food, chemicals, vaccines, which is a really hot topic, autism, and awareness in general.
Yeah.
And you gave me a great introduction, so now everyone already knows I'm a mom of three. And I just wanted to give a little background information of where I'm from and where I live. So just like FleurBrun, New York, born and raised in New York, Italian-American family.
Love it.
In Oregon and Washington, and I moved to Arizona about 10 months ago. I originally was a linguist and studied many different languages, French, Italian, Spanish, Hindi, Urdu, and obviously I speak English. I studied art and sociology and anthropology and philosophy, and I dabbled a little bit into some different religions and atmospheric science, geology, and recently I have been doing and practicing a lot of Kriya Yoga, which is a very form of meditation. And just, I'm very much a people person. Once you get me going, I can talk and talk and talk, and I have traveled quite a bit. And in the spiritual side, I have realized, and I didn't quite realize it a lot of my life, but I'm very much an empath and a sensitive and extremely intuitive. And I am definitely a yogi, and I must have been in past lives. And also, I am very, very clean in that I've never smoked, I've never done drugs, I have never well, not I've never, like, the only few times I've ever had alcohol was with my mom when I was about 14 years old, and my dad, because of the Italian-American culture, there was wine at dinner. But I don't drink alcohol. I haven't, like, in so long.
Good.
And so, in general, I would say that I don't really have any need for vices. I certainly don't gamble or anything. So this information is coming from someone who doesn't do any of those things and is super clean.
Okay.
And I felt that it was important to mention that I've had some wake-ups along the way, is what I would call them. So when I was 15 and 16, I went vegan and drove my parents nuts. My poor father making all the Italian meals, and even though they were delicious, I was rejecting them.
Yes.
And then again, when I was yeah.
I love it.
Oh, and all the yummy pizza. And so then when I was 25 and 26, same thing. I was going vegetarian, and things were very clear, and I was seeing things very clearly. And then I kind of just went into this zone where I started eating a lot of the hamburgers and tacos and pizza and eating out at restaurants I'd never eaten before. And I was finally making money so I could go out to restaurants with my now husband.
Yeah.
And a lot happened along the way. And then around age 35, which was just last year, I could say that I was definitely fully awake. And I'm now 36, and I would definitely say I'm still very, very much awake. I had an experience back in November, and that's how FleurBrun and I actually got in contact, where something happened with my neck, and I believe I had an open vortex from my yogic practices. And I went into this zone that I don't even know where to begin to describe, where I saw things I had never seen before. And the experience was very traumatic and also very eye-opening. And after that experience, I started seeing more and more things I had never seen before. And I would just attribute that to being very, very aware.
Yeah.
I also kind of want to say that along my life, I was always, everything was kind of like fear-driven. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. Oh, I better not do this. I better hide from this. And so I'm finally in a place where I'm coming from love rather than fear, which allows me to come onto your show and actually talk and have the courage to talk and not be afraid, oh my gosh, something might happen to me. Someone, what is that person going to think of me? They're going to judge me.
Beautiful. And
I've always tried to I've always been like number one student, top of my class, always trying to make sure that I do everything I'm supposed to. And these topics that I'm going to talk about, they do kind of put me in a position where there are some people that might go, oh my gosh, she's crazy. And everything I'm going to say, I have done my homework. I've done my research because, again, I'm very studious, just like FleurBrun, coming from the genetics. I'm coming from just being studious in all subjects.
You are.
So I've actually looked up both sides of everything I'm going to mention. And I just wanted to make sure that people knew that. And I've been through a lot with my kids, and there's a story written on my website about what we've been through, and I'll get into that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to add that I started also, during this awakening, I started being able to read energy, and apparently I was already doing it, and I was doing it a lot, but because of the clarity, it started becoming crystal clear, and I started making the connections of what meant what, and my daughter and I both started seeing auras, which was something I didn't even know what an aura was, and I had been seeing it full life, but I didn't know that the glow around people or the light around people or light in certain areas of people, that actually meant something. And it wasn't until I did my yoga studies last year, going up to Kriya Yoga, that I actually got to learn all about that. And then it's like, oh my gosh, and once I could explain what I was seeing, I was then able to help my daughter even more too, and I'll get into that later. And that will bring us into the star seeds and such as well. So I'll connect that later on. I just want to kind of give a little roundabout there. Sorry, I need some water. Need a little bit of water.
Yes, hydration is key. This is what I've learned during the water fast. Hydration is key for everything, for communication.
Oh my gosh. And kudos to you for doing your water fast. That is amazing. I've been able to do 16
That's awesome.
days of
Isn't
fruit
it,
only.
but isn't it amazing?
But the
though?
water,
Only,
that is
amazing.
absolutely amazing.
But isn't it amazing the feeling when you're really in clearing yourself and allowing your body to actually recover from a lot of the toxins that we're, even us coming from a more conscious, more nutritionally holistic base, I feel like even fasting allowed for the clearing of a lot of things, nutricides that are even in some of the foods that we deem to be clean. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
So we're going to start off. I love the fact of how, and I love the fact that you actually added in and denoted that you're a clean person. And I think a lot of times there isn't as much credence and credibility to having conversations and getting intel from someone who isn't engaging in things that alter their consciousness or their mindset or lower their field of awareness. When you are clean and clear, just meaning that you're not being hampered by drugs or alcohol, which would sometimes change the way that you see and from the way that you see things. I think it's very helpful to know when someone is very clear in that way to give a much more clarity to even and more integrity to the conversation and to the intel that's being shared.
Exactly. And also we should point out that you are very clean too. So the things that you're coming out with are coming from a really good source as well. And I don't know if a lot of people in the audience realize that, but I just wanted to point that out too, because that is really important. It's not like we're sitting there smoking stuff and coming up with this stuff. We're actually very clear-headed and very aware. Absolutely. And it's really, really important for people to know. It
is. And I think, a lot of times, and that's sometimes when I start videos, I say, listen, I'm drug and alcohol free. I'm a mother, so I do show up in the world in a way that I want to be a outstanding role model to my children. So I walk in the footsteps so that when my children may follow in mine, even though my steps may be a little bigger, that it at least be in a way that allows for them to safely maneuver themselves with a role model who has allowed a clean path as they follow or maybe sometimes even lead. So I do appreciate that, even just adding that to the criteria, to the ingredients of what it takes to be really heightened in awareness. It isn't necessary to be high or be in mind-altering drugs in order to have a higher sense of consciousness and self-awareness. Okay. Okay.
Exactly.
So
I should probably get into some of the things that triggered me to come on your show.
Yes, please. That's important.
So I was in Sedona with this amazing sister circle.
Yes.
And these women are just so powerful. And then I came back, and it was the beginning of May when I was there, and I came back, and there was an article that had come out in the Santan Sun, which can be found on the santansun.com. And it was regarding vaccines and exemptions. And this hits home because I do use the personal and religious exemptions so that my kids can go to school. And my husband brought it up and said, there's this article that measles is rampant. And, oh my gosh, show me the article. So I read the article, and it triggered a few things for me because it was indicating that, let me see if I can pull up the article while I'm talking. Yeah. Let's see here. So in the article, it said that they felt like the answer to the measles outbreak was to rid the personal exemptions, and that was for the MMR vaccine.
Yes.
And so, go where I was, that was trigger number one, and then trigger number two was that very same day, earlier that day, I had seen these trails, which I've been watching for a while, and some people call them contrails, and some people call them chemtrails, and some people like to use the term geoengineering. And I was looking at them and I was watching them, and I got kind of annoyed, and I'll get into what exactly I saw in a little bit. And then I had also gone to a birthday party for my daughter's friend, and that was quite the experience as well. And I got to to a point where I was just so disgusted. And so then I went and I sent FleurBrun a few bits of information about what I had seen and this article. And then that's when I had offered, I'd be willing to come on and talk. And I couldn't believe I even said that because it's totally not like me to even put myself out there. But then just like, it came up. And I just, okay, it was just there's time to talk about these things.
Absolutely.
And I just finally let go of that fear.
And you're living in Arizona.
So I should probably, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say you're living somewhere. And
yes, I am. I am in Arizona.
Arizona, at one point, I always assumed because you have energetic vortexes, we notice there's a mass exodus of people that are migrating to that beautiful energy that's in Arizona. And we've denoted for years that there's been beautiful waves of energy that many have talked about, just moving there. And it's amazing that with those energies that are there, they're really pushing it by putting more and more chemtrails in the sky.
Yes, and I would believe that. I went to Sedona, like I mentioned, and it's known to have many vortices. There's a vortex where I went, and you could see how the trees were kind of spiralized and such. And even in Sedona, I was seeing this contrail, chemtrail, geoengineering when I was there. And I was just like, really? Even here in Sedona? Seriously?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
That's crazy. That's madness. It's literally madness, because you think to yourself, Sedona should be clear. It should be one of those places that should be negated from any sort of chemtrails. But they, again, it's now another additive to the concoctions of chemicalization. They're adding to the mix of the aerial that people are breathing in.
Yes, and I was just really surprised to see that.
So. What is
so I think I'm going to switch topics.
Yes.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, go ahead. I would love to. I want you to lead.
Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was pretty much what is on my website as the story and the impetus for me doing the book Rainbow Food Rocks. And it isn't published yet. It comes out in the fall of this year. I have everything typed up. I just need to get into a template and publish it. And there's a whole story as to why I'm doing this. That in 2015, in the end of 2015, my oldest daughter, Abigail, was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyper disorder. So they're known as ASD and ADHD. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to really emphasize that she was 4 years old, because that's an age where kids do get vaccines. Now, she was, unlike my other two children, she was born in a hospital, and everything was natural. So all my children, there were no meds. Everything was totally natural. When she was born, she would cry and cry for like 4 hours. Mm. She would wake up screaming a lot. She would almost just like snap like she was schizophrenic. And she sometimes would attack people or throw objects or do really bizarre things, moan, a lot of the things that you see with autism. And she was really, really intelligent. And that kind of hid her a little bit. And her verbal skills were really high, so they matched her, what is known as disability, although I actually think it's a gift, and I'll get into that later. Mm-hmm. And so Abigail was going through all of that. And at the same time, my youngest daughter, she was, I'm trying to remember, she was about a little under 2, around 2 years old. And she was having a tough time. She was having massive fatigue. She was having a gross motor delay. She was screaming from pain in her waist down, especially in her feet and her ankles. She was pushing her stomach up against chairs. And I had been going to conventional doctors at that time. And they didn't really know what was wrong with her. And they kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. And at the same time, also, my youngest, my little son, Jesse, he was breaking out. He just started some Gerber food products, and I don't recommend Gerber food, and I'll get into that also later. But he had started some Gerber food products and was breaking out from what appeared to be a wheat allergy.
Yeah.
Because he had just started eating some solids, and he was getting these reoccurring staph infections on his fingers and in other parts of his body. And so it just kind of all hit me at once. And so I felt like, okay, November 2015 was just a crazy, crazy year. And so I started getting really stressed out, and I also became unwell, but I was kind of on this mission. I got to heal my children. And in that process, I started getting little pains here and there, a little bit in my ankles, a little bit in my calves, some what they were calling varicose veins, saying, oh, you're just getting old, when I had always been totally physically fit and I never had any varicose veins, and it looked like kind of bruises on my ankles starting to come up. I was getting heart palpitations. I was just kind of feeling really irritated. I suddenly had asthma, and it's just like the list goes on, and this is just the beginning of it. And so I decided to start seeking a naturopathic doctor, and we kind of went on this food journey. And what we did was, because of Abigail's diagnosis, she felt that we should eliminate dairy and eventually wheat. So it was really, really challenging, because a lot of people, as soon as you say you want to eliminate dairy, they're like, oh, where are you going to get your calcium? And so I have to do all this research of where we get our calcium. And the thing is, once we eliminated the dairy, there was a dramatic improvement in Abigail. I would say she was about 25% better than she had been previously. And I started realizing, wait a second, okay, so we took out dairy, and this made her a little bit better. So it seems like there's a connection with food. And then my son Jesse, he was already having what we're thinking is a wheat allergy. So we started going, okay, we're going to eliminate dairy now for all the kids, and we're also going to eliminate wheat, because we had already this plan to eliminate the wheat for Abigail.
Yes.
So when we eliminated the wheat, we started substituting a bunch of corn, and that was a big mistake, but I didn't realize it, and I had no knowledge that there's a lot of GMO corn out there. We weren't buying organic back then either.
Yeah.
And I was also making food for other family members, a lot of other children in the community. So I was buying things as affordably as I could, and I didn't really think about the whole, oh, I should get organic, and I should make sure it's GMO free and all of that. And then also the corn is often commingling with the gluten-containing grains.
That's right, commingling.
So that can cause a lot of problems. Yeah, like with wheat, so it mingles with wheat. And when we took out the dairy, the wheat, and the corn, Abigail got about 50% better. So we're talking about like half better from her autistic symptoms that she had.
Yeah.
And because of that, and this, again, realization, oh my gosh, so the food is making this huge difference in my daughter's diagnosis.
That's right.
We decided to remove soy and all artificial and natural flavors and dyes and, all those things that come with numbers and whatnot. And so, and granted, some things are hidden, but we tried doing the best we could. And once we did that, I would say Abigail was about 75% better. So we're talking 3/4 better.
Wow.
And Jesse, the one with the wheat allergy and the staph infection, he cleared up and he was 100% better. Woo! And then we still kind of were lingering with our youngest daughter, Adeline.
Yeah.
She was still having pain from her hips down, and she was having a lot of fatigue. I don't know if I remember if I mentioned earlier, but she wasn't walking because of all the food things. And we started changing the diet, and eventually she started walking. Well, even when she started walking, she was scrunching her feet in pain, and she was only able to walk like 100 feet before she needed the stroller. So something was still up, and we went originally to a conventional doctor. We went to Children's Hospital, and we even had an MRI done because they were thinking that maybe she had spina bifida. And she came out fine. So we went to a naturopathic doctor, and this naturopathic doctor happens to be the one that was my midwife for my other two children's home births.
Yeah.
And again, all natural. And so she went and ran all the blood tests that she could think of. She was looking to see does she have like children's arthritis or what's going on, and nothing came up. And we ran so many blood tests, spent so much money, nothing came up. So by this point, like we spent money on MRIs, we spent money on blood tests, we spent money going to physical therapy. We were just
crazy
trying to figure out what was going on because she was in pain, and she was such a young talker. I mean, my daughter Adeline was talking in full sentences at 13 months old. So she was telling us what she was feeling, and the doctors were just kind of like, no, I'm fine, you know, and throwing us down different rabbit holes. So finally, this naturopathic doctor decides, you know, why don't we look at food? And she was already aware that we were doing the elimination for the other two and for Adeline.
Yes.
And so she offered what's called an IgG allergy test, and it's a food sensitivity test. We test for over 100 foods for allergic reactions. And at this point, the IgG test revealed that eggs were a really big problem for Adeline. And I didn't realize that how eggs are used to make vaccines and just some of the things that are going on with eggs. And so I learned that it can cause a lot of problems for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so Abigail, when we took out the eggs for Adeline, not only did Adeline get better, but then Abigail, I'm going to say, became like 90% better. So we're talking like almost all her symptoms had gone away except for some sensory issues.
That's amazing.
And some maybe like being with other kids, which is absolutely amazing. And we're talking, we never used medication. We've never given her any medication, no drugs for this, which most people do, not most, but many people do put their children on something when they're diagnosed with this. And I remember the nurse practitioner, when we had the diagnosis, was trying to offer us all these different medications. We're like, no, thank you. I'm just the natural route. And so to prove to my husband and myself that all this trial and error of eliminating foods was actually spot on, I ordered an IgG allergy test for Abigail to like actually back up that taking out the eggs and all those other things that we had already taken out really was meaningful to her healing. And the results were pretty much surprising, but not surprising, because it showed that the kids could not tolerate these food items.
That's right.
And I was just like, I have proof. Like, everything I did was like trial and error. And then I'm like, this is my proof. Like, I was spot on. Like, I was doing the right thing. I am doing the right thing. It was affirmation. I was just really, really excited. And I also noticed that I had the same issues with those foods as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was thinking back, like, when I was growing up, too, like, my poor dad, my mom, because I was very high energy, and I ate all those things that most New Yorkers do, you know, bagels, pizza, cannolis, rainbow cookies,
the Italian,
and all my favorite things from when I was growing up.
Yes.
And I just was nonstop as a kid. I was just going and going and going. So sure enough, I actually don't tolerate those foods very well either. And I didn't really notice that until I started taking them out. And I was like, wow, things are getting really clear. And I had kind of my partial awakening, like I mentioned, at 15, 16, and so it was like 26 where I changed my diet. And so I wasn't really eating those. So I was crystal clear there too. Mm-hmm. So as we were going through this, my health actually started having issues too. And it got worse and worse. And then I was kind of perplexed. I'm like, okay, I've taken out the wheat, I've taken out the dairy, I've taken out the corn, I've taken out the soy, I've taken out the eggs. But I started getting what was, in my opinion, looking like relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. And I was like really, really scared. Again, coming from someone very physically fit. Yeah. I mean, even though I ate a lot of New York food growing up, I made decent choices as I could
and you were
when
fine.
I could.
And you seemingly were fine.
Yeah, and you know, I okay when I was younger and such. And so all of a sudden, all these things were coming up all at once. And this was around, I want to say 2016, about November 2016. My friend pointed out that I had a defect suddenly in my spine. My left shoulder was raised. It looked as if I had been in a car accident with my left shoulder raised. My right hip was kind of out of alignment. And all these things were suddenly going on. And I had that fatigue getting worse. And we had just moved into a 3-story house. And my kids were really young then still.
Yeah.
So we're talking about them maybe being like 5 and 3 and 1. I can't remember exactly their age, but it's around that. And so I had to go up and down the stairs a lot. And it was starting to get so bad that I was using like the railing to pull myself up the stairs. And, I'm laughing, but it's actually not funny. I was in so much pain, but I looked like when you looked at me, I didn't look like I was in pain. I have a high pain tolerance. I was trying to really hide it, but I was in a lot of pain. And so I started experimenting all these different diets. I tried the paleo diet. I tried the GAPS diet. I tried the Wald diet. I tried doing the FODMAP thing.
That's right.
And nothing, I tried everything. Nothing was working. And so I had one day, I just had this enormous stomach pain, and I'd never felt anything like that before. And it scared me because not only did I have that, but then the pain that was already in my legs and in my hips, it started extending to my arms from my elbows down to my wrists. And I was like, oh no, something's really wrong here. And my speech kind of got a little bit slurred. It was more difficult to come up with the words of what I wanted to say. This fog was coming over my head. I'm like, something really, 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 really wrong.
It's
so I
like
go to naturopathic doctor and helping my kids and also with my midwife.
Yeah.
Say again?
It's like slowly being poisoned. That's what your
symptoms.
That's what your symptoms were seeming like. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so she diagnosed me with what is called the reactivation of the Epstein-Barr virus. And so of course I'm like, well, what in the world is that?
Exactly.
Well, you must have had the Epstein-Barr virus when you were younger, and you probably didn't notice it. And maybe you were sick for a long time, maybe you weren't, and then it stayed in your body, and it got triggered and reactivated. It was hiding somewhere in your body and got reactivated. I was like, okay, well, that's a first for me. I've never heard of that. I've heard of mono, I've heard of the kissing disease, but it was totally brand new for me. And so I went and researched, and I know in one of your shows you were talking about the celery and everything. So I actually researched Anthony Williams. He's known as the medical medium.
Yes.
And I read his book. I found it really interesting. And what was really interesting for me is that he was talking about taking out the exact foods that I had already taken out.
Yes.
He's talking about taking out wheat, dairy, corn, soy, and eggs. And I was like, holy moly, this guy, he must be onto something, because he's talking about taking out the same foods that I took out, and that it also helps autism. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah. And so he was also talking about reducing the meat. So it was difficult, but finally when I got really into my yogic studies, it was highly encouraged to take out meat. So that kind of went hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And that was just last year. And so I took out the meat, and I guess we could describe it as becoming plant-based. So I'm not quite a vegan. I still eat honey, but I kind of ate like a vegan, So it's vegetarian is definitely the word to use. But when I go out to eat, I have to say gluten-free, corn-free, soy-free, vegan for them to understand how to make my food.
I'm with you. I'm so with you on that. And it's wonderful because the environment is now, what's wonderful about now is that because the consciousness of the planet is raising in nutrition, and because of the sensitivity of our beautiful children now restaurants are now starting to cater to people like ourselves. To be honest, they are starting to. Now you can get orders now at certain places that are soy-free.
They are starting to.
Yes, soy-free, gluten-free.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great cafe here that's, it's called the Pomegranate Cafe, and they are starting to make food like that. Even though there's a pizzeria out here called Picasso's, and they have, like this gluten-free vegan crust that's compliant, and you can just put no cheese and just get vegetables. Oh yeah, corn-free, soy-free crust, everything-free crust, which is really impressive. I
love it.
And a lot of places are starting to make a lot more like juices and smoothies, but organic ones, which is, in my opinion, pretty important. And it's really nice to be out here to see that happening. And you were mentioning to me that it sounded like I was poisoned, and, I didn't mention, it's not on my website, but back in 2015, when all this was going on with my kids, I did need some dental work, and I was actually exposed to mercury from toothpaste. That when I went to the dentist, I wasn't informed that there's a special procedure for removing mercury fillings.
Yes. Yes.
And I went back in my records, and I also had another dentist here in Arizona verify it for me that I was exposed to mercury.
Toxicity.
And that, if you, I'm sure you've researched it, but if the audience research can really wreak havoc in the system.
It does.
And so that probably was why I was having those relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis-like symptoms. And I needed to detox, and eating very clean was definitely the thing to do. And that helped me a lot. And then also tying that in with my yogic studies and really focusing on my spirituality and such, that really paved the way for my healing.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
I think I'm just going to grab a little bit of water here for a moment.
Oh, no, absolutely, absolutely. And what I think is amazing is sometimes adversity is a gift. I learned that when I did one of my most challenging, I did a spiritual retreat at Edgar Cayce's Institute in Virginia Beach. And I learned that sometimes what we deem to be are the things that we say are the trials or tribulations we go through. Those are just the catalyst, the ingredients that actually wake us up to something that we needed to be aware about. You know what I mean? So you having this beautiful journey and your children's nutritional sensitivities and also the diagnosis of your daughter were the ingredients, the catalyst to propel you into the world of naturopathic herbalism and in holistic living, and taking out those things that literally have been input into our food steerage as a way to lessen the cost of shelf life, because a lot of times a lot of the wheat has been changed to allow for wheat to grow much more unhampered by vermin, so they change the wheat so that it becomes more strong and much more effective in fighting off pests. But in doing so, they change the genomes and the genetics of it so that when we eat it and consume it now, it's no longer food. Now it's a toxic poison that our system does not recognize. And that's why people, because me and you grew up in New York, we didn't have gluten sensitivities. We didn't have, come on, celiac disease. A lot of us ate pizza, pasta. We grew up in New York, bagels, pretzels.
Yep.
There wasn't that. Wonder Bread was on everybody's table. Nobody got sick from it. It wasn't until about 1999 or about 98 that you started to see people getting wheat allergies, children starting to get more nut allergies, because they started to commingle some of the wheats with nuts and factories, which they didn't do previously, and started to add a lot more things, again, to give more shelf life to a lot of these foods that, people considering dense starches sitting on the shelf. They needed to have more shelf life. So they added more additives and didn't tell us about it, didn't give us the memo. I didn't get the memo. And we started to see children being born with all these hypersensitivities to all these wheats and glutens, which was not present previously.
Exactly. And it's so interesting that you just said that, because I went to visit my dad not too long ago, maybe like a year ago or a year and a half ago, and I remember him like, well, I don't remember you having a problem with these foods when you were younger. Like, where did all these allergies come from? And he made a really good point too. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that was around, like, I left New York around the year 2000. I went back and forth a little bit, but I did eat all those things, a lot of those things, until I left.
Yeah, I think again we didn't get the memo on the changes and the additives that were and the modification, the genetic modification of a lot of the wheat. And me being an agriculturalist, where I've grown a lot of my own foods, I've grown wheat, different types of wheat, spelt, teff. There's different types of heirlooms, and you also see how the actual seed, the actual wheat seed looks, the berry looks very different than how our ancestors, because I know a lot of the Amish farmers would exchange seeds or berries from the wheat, and you would notice that the berries look totally different in color and texture than the ones that are being sold to you and mass production corporate wise. So Amish are holding on to the heirloom seeds, and I'm seeing the seeds and they're different color. They look differently, different shapes. Ours look really sick. So that's when I began to really realize that, you know, with the help of Dr. Sebi, who I knew was promoting eating more heirlooms, meaning grains that were older in, you know, older in as far as how long ago they went back before being modified, before they were being modified, I found that there was a difference in how they even looked in comparison to something that was newer or genetically modified. And you take in consideration corn, the majority of corn that we're eating right now, I don't know of any generation of corn that isn't modified at this point, unless it's brown or like, you know, you ever see the Indian corn that has like the purplish kind of darkish piece, the pepper, black and pepper looking? That's the only one that I know is an heirloom, but most people didn't consume that. We weren't consuming those at one point, unless people were making tortillas in like Mexico and Central America, they might have used it and dried it out for certain things, but we didn't really eat those. So, I mean,
and I'm so glad that you're mentioning corn.
yeah, corn is really wreaking havoc off the gastric, and most people's gastric system, and it's added to mostly everything: cornstarch, corn, you know, soy.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, please share with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look at what my kids see other people eating, and then I'll go to functions and see it too. And so my kids go to school and they watch what the kids are eating with a hot lunch and such. And a lot of those foods have wheat, dairy, corn, soy, and eggs in them. And then all the functions, like every single birthday party or parents' night out, they're serving, and I don't know if I can say this brand, but they're serving Little Caesars pizza. And I know right there, it's like, okay, that is everything all in one. And the kids in schools are often having a lot of behavior issues. My daughter is, amazingly, she sits there perfectly, and she's never gotten in trouble. And she's telling me, Mom, these kids, they're eating this and they're eating that, and she'll tell me what they're eating, and then their behavior is so atrocious. I can't even learn anything. And I feel so badly, and I was thinking, gosh, you know, why aren't parents paying attention to what the kids are eating? The kids are getting packed candies and all these packaged foods, and I see like the GMO, chemical-laden, sprayed conventional produce, even if they offer like an apple or something at the schools or even at the functions, they'll get those trays of vegetables that are, I guess, the best choice that my kids can choose at a function. Yeah. But still having an issue. And that kind of ties into something I'll talk more about later on, but I'll just briefly mention right now that I was listening to a person, his name is Rex, and he does a show called Sleep Project, and he was talking about aborted baby kidney fetus cells that used as flavor enhancers. And I got a little curious, so I was like, okay, well, let me look this up. And so you'll see that if you look up the patent for, what is it called? I think it's called the HEK 293.
Wow.
And if you check out places, and I'm probably mispronounce it, but like Phenomix, and I know I've kind of written in on some of your shows on your lives to mention it too, that you'll see that they're using, I mean, if you research it, it looks like they're using one specific one and they replicated it. But I decided to investigate even more, and so I went on to the pro-life website, and that would be at the one I looked at was Children of God for Life, www.cogforlife.org.
Okay.
And it just really brought me to another level, and I'm going to tie it later in with the vaccine, of more stuff that's going on with our food. So like we think, okay, we're already having all these issues with everything that you and I just discussed, but they are using these fetal products to create these flavors and trick the brain into liking whatever food products they're making. Right. And to me, it just got really disturbing. And so they do say, and this pro-life organization, they were having these boycotts back in 2011, and they boycotted Pepsi and Kraft and Campbell's Soup. And so those businesses ended their relationships with Cinemix or Cinemix, or however you pronounce it. But there are other ones that didn't end their business with that. So there's a private Swiss company, FleurBrun and I, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mm-hmm. They make perfumes and flavors. There's the largest producer of aspartame, Ajinomoto. They make flavors. They have like umami seasoning and other flavors, seasonings. And then Nestle products. And Nestle products stuck out for me because they have so much under them. I mean, there are all different kinds of candies. There's Gerber baby food. There's San Pellegrino water. There's chocolates. There's certain types of pizzas like DiGiorno pizza or California Pizza Kitchen. There's Perrier water. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, like some of this stuff, even if I'm not consuming, my kids aren't consuming, there are other family members that I have that are.
Absolutely.
And whether someone is pro-life or not, when I start thinking about, we're using these cells from aborted baby fetuses, the kidneys, I guess, of these aborted baby fetuses. It just gets a little disturbing. And so again, they're saying that there are no aborted fetus cells in the end product. But
what?
It's
the end product? Wow. Wow.
It's kind of iffy. Yeah, like in the end product. And so like, okay, well, so at what point, are they taking this out? I just,
that's disturbing.
It really irks me. But even if they're taking it out, I'm going to later on tie in how it's definitely 100% in the vaccines, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I did want to also mention that they are definitely putting it in skin creams and some cosmetics, and people can go on the website and look. And I did cross-reference, so when I get into it in a little bit, I mean, I did go on for the vaccines, I did go on the CDC website and such and check to see what exactly the ingredients are. Mm-hmm. So I did cross-reference and did my homework with the government sites and the FDA sites to make sure that this documentation was correct. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I'm going to kind of leave it at that for a moment and go back to what we were talking about, just to kind of close that up before I move on, because I didn't get to touch upon how, with everything that went on with the food, I kind of left us off where I was wanting to note that Abigail, not only did she get better when we were taking out the foods, but I didn't want to forget to mention about how we were talking in the beginning that she is a starseed, and how there are a lot of these kids that are looking like they're autistic when, in my opinion, they're reacting from these foods and all the things going on with the foods. And it's muting their perceptions of other things. It's muting their abilities. And this is my opinion based on what I've seen and with what's in my own household. But what I have come to realize, and what I was saying a little bit earlier in the beginning about Abigail having gifts and these kids having gifts, is that Abigail started to sense energy. She started to have these very incredible dreams, and she started to also see what I used to know as glows, which we learned are auras. And as I was on my journey of awakening. I was able to communicate that with her, and she was able to see those, and she was seeing the auras of plants and auras of people and telling me the colors and asking me, Mom, what do they mean? I mean, I actually, it took me a while to figure out what things meant, but I just really, this whole journey is making me realize that these kids, like if you're put on medication or you're eating these foods or you're doing both, you're eating these foods and you're on medication, if your head's so clouded, there's no way that you're going to be able to express these things. And imagine if you're like stuck in a box and you're in like pain from these foods and you can't say anything. And it's just, I feel so badly for these kids. It makes me so upset to see these kids be put on this medication. And then I went to a place called the Autism Academy, and I was curious, okay, there's an academy that's dedicated to children with autism. I wonder if they have any idea about this connection with food. Like, do they serve these kids a special diet? Do they encourage them to not be on medication? You know, what are they doing with these kids? And I'm not trying to make it look bad. I'm sure they have really good intentions by working with these kids and such. But I went in there and I went with my youngest son, and he was scared. And I have to say, I was really scared. We saw the kids eating like Cheetos and drinking Capri Suns, and they were doing all your typical autistic symptoms. And it was just like my heart went out. Like I just was like, oh my gosh, it's more to like eat different food and not doing these medications and just be outside in the sunshine more and such. Like these kids could really thrive and heal.
And also, also being a facilitator, what I do notice in a lot of these facilities and a lot of these institutions that, remember, my mother was in special ed, I taught special ed as well, is that they give children reward with candy.
That's right.
With candy. Or with sweets.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you so much, because that's what goes on in my daughter's school.
All the time.
That's what goes on in the school, and they're rewarding them with this candy that's just making the behavior worse.
Yes, it's a drug, and the reason why we have more alcohol syndrome babies and more systematic people showing up with what has been classified as alcoholism is because we're creating little alcoholics by giving enhanced amount of sugars, because sugars change. Sucrose has changed. They've not only modified sugars, but they've actually changed the way that they actually mill the cane. Cane comes from my island, and they mill it differently, and they change the way that it comes out. So now sugar's sweeter than it used to be, and they put sugar in toothpaste. They put sugar in anything that goes in your mouth, mouthwash, sugars in everything, sugars in things that shouldn't be in any food. And coming from the islands, one thing that we used to grow up on is bitters. Bitters kills parasites, and it also allows for heightening up your pH and raising your alkalinity. Bitters has been replaced by sugars, and sugar is acidic. And that's what's causing the children's minds to atrophy. That's what's also causing the behavioral issues. It's also what's causing all these ADHD diagnoses. It is definitely, and I love that you brought this up, it is the food. But reinforcing children with sugar in classrooms is a form of abuse, in my opinion. And giving them that during the course of a day, giving them highs and allowing them to crash low, there's no wonder our children are not suffering from more bipolar or schizophrenic type of behavior patterns based on being perpetually fed sugar, which is a form of distilled sugar is liquor, is alcohol. So it's getting children prepped to be addicted to a lot of the substances later that we're seeing systemically in our society this day. So I just want to add that.
Yes, thank you for adding that. I'm so glad that you did. You have a lot of knowledge too, so it's great when you come in with your knowledge and I'm coming in with what I'm seeing firsthand or experiencing. So we put it all together.
We're like the tag team mom. The tag team mom. Go, Gail. Go for it. We're going to heal these babies. We're going to heal these babies by hook or crook. We're going to teach the mommies, and we're going to share it with each other. It's very important for us to have these conversations. They're not being had as readily amongst ordinary mothers. I think a lot of times these are had amongst facilitators, which I've had myself, behind closed doors. I think this is a conversation every mother should have with another mother. And you reach one, you teach one. You sharing this with the Sea Stars and Sun Stars is absolutely remarkable. And you won't even realize how many people you're helping even in having this discussion. That's why I'm so excited and grateful you've joined us tonight.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just so glad to get this out because I feel like people right now really, really, really need to know this. And these kids, I mean, these starseeds, they know what's good and bad for their bodies, and they're like the canaries in a coal mine. Like, as we're seeing all these diagnoses, they're the ones showing us that we shouldn't be having all these foods, we shouldn't be having all these chemicals. And we'll get into the vaccine still in a little bit too, but I mean, these are hurting the kids and anyone else that participates in that. So, and you had a video earlier too, remember if it was this year or last year, about the kids, the autistic kids being the star seeds and being misunderstood. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, thank goodness she's saying this, because that's what I was observing, and that's what I had been observing.
They're highly sensitive. They know this too. They're highly sensitive, very empathic, their systems are different. They come in very open. And that's why I personally think a lot of these vaccines are being designated to hurt the starseed. I personally think, that's my personal opinion, I personally think a lot of these engineered vaccines are being created as a way to mute the beautiful abilities of these beautiful seeds coming through to heal and to help to assist us in order to get this planet back in a healthy homeostasis. I think they're doing that.
And when I get into the ingredients, that might very well be the case too, because there's stuff in those ingredients that would only make an autistic child worse or give somebody a diagnosis of autism or ADHD. So I can definitely see that. And I just wanted to kind of throw out there, like, what my kids eat and what I eat before I move on, because I'm going to move on to another topic in a little bit, is so for my kids, unlike me, my kids actually do eat meat, although I found that taking out meat has been better for me. And I just wanted to kind of go over what my kids eat. So if there is a parent out there that's looking to change his or her child's diet, that maybe this would be helpful. So, you know, as like I mentioned, taking out the wheat, dairy, corn, soy, and eggs. Also, my kids are pretty much strictly eating organic, or what one would consider organic, maybe even better than organic, fruits and vegetables, the best meat that I can find. So that's like, you know, the grass-fed, grass-finish, or it just depends, but there are different qualities and so on. And they also eat beans, and then they eat other grains. I know rice can be hit or miss, so they do a little bit of rice here and there. The gluten-free sprouted oats we do. I sprout my own lentils. I sprout my own beans. I sprout, I sprout quinoa. So we do have those going on. And then I do have food that I'm trying to make in my backyard. And I had my first garden, and we do eat like dandelions. I've been eating dandelions for the last 2 or 3 years, and the kids, when they were babies,
they eat them.
When the kids were babies, they were doing it naturally. They were crawling around, and they were eating dandelions. And I remember people saying to me, like, "Oh, your child's eating a dandelion."
Yes, okay, I love it. yes. They naturally knew that was food. I love it. This is beautiful. And the Italian women, I think I told you that before. The Italians used to come from in New York, and the Italian women would come straight out of Sicily, and they used to go in the gardens of everyone's gardens and pick the dandelions because they used to eat it. They used to use it. And my mother was like, I was like, Mommy, what are they doing? She's like,
I gotta ask my dad about that one.
Yes. I was like, they eat the day. I was like, how did they know that? She was like, well, you know, these are people who live in the old world. They do things standardly the way that they were reared. And I thought that was so interesting that they saw it as their food. I love it.
Yeah, and the Greeks do that too. The Greeks will use dandelions for soup.
Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing.
And my son, he'll go in the backyard and he'll eat kale. Like, he's been eating kale since he's been able to eat. And it's so funny because most people are like astounded, like, your son is eating kale. We're up at a farm in Washington,
Yes.
A really great farm on Camino Island. I think it's called Ananda Farm.
Yeah.
And my son was there. And he was running around and he was grabbing kale and eating it, grabbing broccoli and eating it, he was grabbing dandelions, he was grabbing everything. And the two people that own this farm, their names are Zach and Haley, and they were just amazed. Oh my gosh, and I think they were thrilled.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And it's also a testament that you've taught them what food is. You've actually shown them what's food, and they recognize it and they will consume it. Children like to feel good. And that's another misnomer that a lot of people don't realize. Children don't like to be chemicalized. When a child has actually had alive electric water that's alive, that has alkalinity, that has energy, and when children have tasted fruit that have readily available energy, they will always choose that. I'm an islander. We always chose fresh fruit if we wanted to go play outside. Why? Because it gave us energy immediately. Anything that hampers your system makes you tired, gives you itis. That isn't food. That's not fuel. That's a chemical. That's a drug. Okay, narcotic. Anything that gives you fuel gives you energy. Apples, oranges, pineapples, things that you eat that have energy, that have been freshly picked, they will give you energy right away. And you'll be able to utilize it. Everything else is dense and dead. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember my dad growing up in New York. He would cut up watermelon and lots of fruits. He was always coming home with all kinds of fruit, and I loved it. So,
I love it.
Fruit, I definitely encourage fruit, and I certainly make sure my kids avoid things like citric acid or ascorbic acid or cane sugar, especially. We avoid vinegar because of the corn. Corn is just hidden in so many things. Like when I try to explain to people that there's corn in citric acid or ascorbic acid or vinegar, they just like, what? Like a lot of, and even I was not educated in this. I had to really look into all these things. I mean, if I want to get just like a regular vitamin C supplement, we're talking about coming from corn.
Oh, yes. Oh, and thank you. Speak on that.
I didn't realize that, like when I was trying to heal.
Yes.
Yes, and so there is a vitamin C out there, I think it's extra C, that doesn't have corn in it, but most of the time, and especially if people are buying those gummies for their kids, and if your child has any symptoms, and there's going to be corn in those gummies that they're selling at Costco or wherever, and then they're saying, oh yeah, give these to your kids. I definitely don't.
Well, because
think that's a good idea.
And then they'll hide it as corn syrup because people are like, oh, that's not corn. I said it says corn syrup. That's corn. Corn syrup is corn. It's derived from corn. Everything. And then soy is another hidden component. Soy is like the mega additive, and soy lecithin is in everything. Lotions, hair, conditioners. You have to make everything because they have so many chemicals in your lotions that would, if you can't read it, my little ones know. If you can't read it, you can't eat it. Okay? That's what they know. So, Mommy, can we eat this? Yes.
Yeah.
You can eat the, you should be able to eat your lotion.
That's great phrase. If you can't read it, you can't eat it.
That's right.
Everyone. You can't read it, you can't eat it. I love that slogan. We need to post that somewhere.
We need to put it. We need to get T-shirts. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get T-shirts and rock that at the PTA
that's the slogan. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. You can't eat it. You can't read it. You can't eat it.
Because our skin is our largest organ. People don't realize everything gets absorbed in your skin. So if you're putting on something that has a multitude of chemicals on it, which most lotions do, unless you create your own, which many of us do, who have children who are sensitive, or ourselves who are just very self-aware. Like during my fast, I think I told everyone, I put goat ghee on me the entire fast. They were like, why did you do goat ghee? I said, because the ghee.
Yeah, I remember that.
The ghee has, and it was from a holistic farm. They weren't milling the goats. They weren't abusing them. They just took what they needed and allowed the goat babies to eat the goat. So it was a very ethical and moralistic farm that was only self-serving. And I put the ghee on me because I also understood that it had nutrition. So during the fast, even though I'm fasting, I'm putting ghee on me, which is a type of fat, a fatty soluble that the goats have very nice fat soluble components, protein in their milk. And it's really good for your hair and your skin. And I felt amazing, and I felt confident because there was nothing else in there but that. You know what I mean? There weren't any extra additives that I had to go to the encyclopedia and try to break down. You know, sometimes I feel like Einstein. Come on now. If I gotta look it up, like what's that?
You were glowing. You were glowing, like just. You look so vibrant.
30 days of
no eating. You still do, even after the fast. You were just glowing.
It was amazing, and I will tell you, Gail.
And I'm so glad that you're talking about the things in the soap. Yeah?
Yes, and I will tell you, Gail, what was amazing and strikingly amazing is that during the entirety of not eating for 30 days, because people will tell you everything. Oh, you're going to starve. You'll die. You know, I think I've heard everything during the fast. I was like, well, thank you for your encouragement. I really appreciate your kind words. Thank you for wishing me well, but I really found I was humbled by the process, and I also have children that are hypersensitive, especially my youngest, which I've talked about. Her skin, she has all these things that show up on her skin from the sun, and she's lacking UVB rays, which she's not getting because of the chemtrails. So children are not getting the proper solar exposure, so they're getting all these other radiation type of energy from the sun, because they're putting reflective chemicals and metals in the sky. But I found when I fasted that I couldn't believe the clarity, Gail. I couldn't believe it. Like, I could hear better. I could see better. I could understand concepts, logos, things that I had to think. You know, I'm fairly intelligent. I'm not the smartest cookie in the room, but I'm fairly intelligent. Just mean I can perceive and conceive things properly and be able to discern. But during this fast, I found that my mind and the way that I was able to process information was so much quicker, like a computer that had been upgraded. And then I realized, as a mother who doesn't do drugs and alcohol, who doesn't consume GMO foods, I am purely without metal in my household, which I've already converted everything to glass, clay, and to bamboo. I use zero metals to cook with any longer. I've stopped that. And I do want to extend that to mothers who have sons who are suffering from autism, because there's too many metals in everything that we have. They even put metals in some cereals, you know, and you can test this by putting magnets next to your cereals, because sometimes they'll pull. There'll be a magnetic charge for some of these Kellogg's and all these other processed cereals. So I think we need to really reassess, really beginning to farm our foods personally. You're starting to do it. I do it. We're going to have to take accountability for the things that we bring in our households, and we're going to have to grow the majority of things that we are going to consume from now on, because there can be no other, there can be no verification of other third parties anymore, because they've proven time and time again they are not for the consumer. They are purely for profit.
And this just ties right into what I wanted to go into next about all the chemicals and all of that, because I was talking to my husband not that long ago, and I was thinking about all the different chemicals. Like, say you wake up in the morning and you go to brush your teeth and rinse your mouth and take a shower and wash up and shampoo and maybe use hand soap or whatnot. And so you go through your morning routine. Now, for most people, and this isn't for me anymore, I make my own stuff, but for most people, how many chemicals are they exposed to in just their morning routine? The toothpaste, the body soap, the shampoo, the shaving cream for the male. Like I said, and then you were talking about cereals. I mean, we don't eat those anymore, but if we go back more than 4 years ago, we were eating all of those, and that was a big problem. And then, you go through your morning routine, you have your food that maybe has glyphosate or what have you, and then you go to work and you're getting the exhaust from cars, or, school buses, and such, and maybe you go to the gym and they're using chemicals. I've actually seen that where they're at the gym working out, and I look over and someone's spraying a bunch of chemicals and cleaning agents over the water fountain, and it didn't look like it got wiped off very well. And I watched someone walk over and then take a sip of water from the water fountain. I was like, whoa. and just surfaces everywhere we go. I mean, some people are catching on and using some cleaner things. There's a brand out there now called Truth and such.
Oh.
But so we just go into that, and then, you know, the water has fluoride and chlorine and all these other things in it. And then we're getting into tying us back into those chemtrails and such, you know, stuff coming out of the sky, and I'll get into that in a moment. And then the ground, like I live in Arizona,
yeah.
and I was astonished when I moved here. Now I know that they're using chemicals in Washington and other states too, but it was really, really apparent to me here. A lot of people, they have to get their yards landscaped because the city will find them, their HOAs will find them. So if you don't keep up with it, then you'll have to pay for it. And so I watch a lot of people, the landscapers, they're using the Roundup, they're using the weed killers, so they're spraying the chemicals in their yards and their homes. And then out here, there's a big problem with scorpions and ants and black widow spiders and other things. And so then they're spraying chemicals for all those areas. And before you know it, in the parks too. Like I go to take my kids to the park. There's a beautiful park not too far from here. And we'll walk to the park, and we get there, and I mean, there's the green from where they were spraying all the weeds on top of the weeds, and then they're spraying the grass. And like I told my kids, I'm like, don't play in that grass. I'm so sorry. Say, don't go in that grass.
It's crazy.
And
play in the grass.
And they're spraying on the sidewalks, and I'm just like, this is chemical city. I moved to chemical city. And I'm laughing, but it's really not funny because I've gotten asthmatic symptoms from it, and my kids keep breaking out in these rashes.
Mine too.
And even they go to school, and the schools are using this stuff. They're using the stuff to get rid of the scorpions, stuff to get rid of the ants. They're using stuff to get rid of the weeds. And the kids sit on the grass there, and then they come home and they got rashes on their legs. And I'm like, did you sit on the grass? Yeah, we had it for pee. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's just getting to a point where if people don't wake up and start using different products and really think, like, talk to the landscaper and say, you know, I'm not going to use your service.
That's right.
If you don't stop using these chemicals, it hurts my kids. It's hurting my lungs. It's not good. It's hurting my neighbor. It's blowing over to my neighbor's yard. You know, my neighbor has a health issue. If people don't start waking up and speaking up, it's going to make people sicker and sicker. And I have to run 3 air filters in my house so that I can breathe really well. I'm making my own toiletries. I have everyone in Arizona really should, if they don't have, get their water filtered. We have a house filter that filters everything because the water quality is so bad. We had a guy come out and test our water. I was like, oh my gosh, it wasn't even potable. It was so bad. And I couldn't believe, I mean, I kind of suspected it was bad because I was having a lot of reactions when I first moved here, but I didn't realize how bad it was. And so I make my own shampoo. I make my own soap. I mean, I'm maybe a little excessive. You know, I try to make almost all my own food unless I'm going out to eat with someone or meeting with someone.
Yeah. You're good. I'm there with you.
But then I was thinking, okay, wait, so let's say we have gardens, right? So now we're trying to make our food as clean as possible. Yeah. And I have a garden I started. You're an awesome gardener. You do composting and everything. But we got stuff coming out of the sky now. And so, and when I say that, people are going to think I'm a little kooky, and hopefully my friends don't judge me too much. But it is a fact. They did a study in Zurich that if nothing else, there's definitely aluminum and barium, and I can't remember, maybe strontium, and I want to say maybe a total of 12 metals coming out of the exhausts of airplanes. And that's if nothing else. That's if we're not saying that anything's being sprayed or whatnot. It's definitely coming out of the sky. I've also read about nanotechnology coming out of the sky, radiation still coming out of the sky, and I get into some discussions with certain family members about this because the question is like, would somebody really spray stuff purposefully over and around our skies? And so I'll usually answer with, well, here's what I see. So I moved to Arizona. The sky is usually pretty clear.
Yeah.
So I will go outside and I'll get all excited. I'm going to get the sun on me. Yay, it's all nice and clear.
Yeah.
And I'll watch all of a sudden. Now, there are 21, at least 21, maybe 22 airports in my, I'm going to say vicinity. I don't want to give too much information where I am, but there are about 21, 22 airports not too far from where I live. So meaning I could drive one way, get to one, drive one, so they're really far. And I watch these planes come up and they go straight up and they make these tic-tac-toe almost like patterns. And I know I sent you some of the pictures, FleurBrun. And so I see this tic-tac like pattern and I watch these expand out and create this thin, almost kind of cloud coverage. Yeah. And I'll watch, I'll take time, like, I'll go out and time the pictures. Like, okay, I'll go out and half an hour later I'll go out again, half an hour later I'll go out again. And I'm taking the pictures and watching it. So my beautiful, clear day becomes full of clouds. Now, we could say, okay, well, maybe this is a contrail. That means it's the condensation coming from the plane, and it's expanding and it's covering our skies. Or we could say maybe there are chemicals, maybe it's just the exhaust, or maybe it's just the way the atmosphere is, okay, and then that expands. Or we could say maybe they actually do have the ability to intentionally or whatever put spray some stuff. And so I watch, sometimes they have this like zipper-like trail that also expands a little bit differently. And I've watched also this kind of arc. And it seems like the planes go kind of pretty high. But what I see is like they go up pretty high and then they come right back down in an arc. And there's some kind of pattern to it too. Like I saw it on May 5th and I saw it on May 6th and I saw it on May 8th and I saw it on May 9th. And I remember the forecast was supposed to be like sunny and clear and it turned into cloudy and cool. And that was kind of surprising for me. And I was curious, so I did some homework on geoengineering, and it turns out that we used geoengineering starting at World War II, and we also used it, I believe, for the Vietnam War. I want to say, was it Ho Chi Minh? I can't remember. And so geoengineering definitely does exist. We've used it before. We've used it for wars. And I definitely see something going on around here. There is a testing facility of some sort full of planes, and it's not too far from where I live. I want to say maybe it's 15 miles away from where I live. Again, I don't want to give out too much information, but I have heard some interesting roaring of planes and such, and it kind of makes me wonder, and I think to myself, okay, well, if the argument is that these aren't chemtrails, then we could at least say, at the very, very least, that whatever is going on is creating cloud coverage and is taking our beautiful day where we had the ability to get the sun on our skin, and now we definitely do not have the ability. I mean, yes, it can come through the clouds, but we're not getting it in the same way. And if nothing else, the amount of planes that I'm seeing definitely, if nothing else, is coming from the exhaust of these heavy metals. So I just wanted to see what you had to say and what knowledge you have, FleurBrun, on that, because I'm seeing that and it's bothering me.
I mean, we've known for years. I think over the last 12, 13 years, we've had a great community of researchers who've been independently testing the chemicals that are basically being sprayed aerial-wise that take about 2 to 3 hours to dissipate and eventually come down on us. It was myself and Barry who came with the conclusion that not only are these metals coming from the sky and being sprayed aerial-wise, that when they do come down and do touch down on our physicality, our bodies, our biospheres, they generally tend to have fibers. We call them nanofibers that go underneath our skin, and we found that they are able to replicate utilizing some of the electronics we use. So this is for the past 12, 13 years, researchers, these independent researchers who have found this, have perpetually and have systematically brought this to the governmental officials and told them, listen, we've done the testing ourselves. We have more than one or two sources that we have backup saying that these are the host of chemicals, along with other nutricides that we don't even talk about because they're not always the same cocktail coming down all the time. And time again, this information has been shunned. It has basically been thrown out of the court, and they have told us that we have no concern that there isn't anything to the greatest number or to the greatest degree that has anything that can alter or harm us, which we know they've been known to lie before. So, basically there hasn't been anything that we personally can do about the aerial spraying of this. Now, what I will say about the gardening, which I found myself is helpful, and this is what I would suggest to anyone who is doing home farming, is that you will start to have to do what I do. You can create your own solarium. Some people, if you have a little more extra and you have a little more resources, you create an indoor heightened, greenhouse, which many of us are doing now, as a way to keep from the aerials from infiltrating your legumes, your fruit and your vegetables. It's unfortunate that we have to do this, but in order for us to keep the amount of vegetables and things that we're deciding to grow personally on our own, we are going to have to be more proactive and disallowing even the very air that's coming down out of the sky to touch the food that we are going to consume. It's a problem. We know that we have to do extra in order to make sure that ourselves and our children have a better chance of keeping as much chemicals out of them as possible. I mean, we have to walk and talk and breathe the air. It's nothing we can do as far as that's concerned, but you're going to at least have to take it a step up and try to be more proactive. Now, the contrails, chemtrails, a lot of times they're one of the same. Even Jetstream has a certain amount of chemicals, aerial sprays that sprays in the skies as well. So I think I answered the question. I think, was that what you asked? Did I kind of expound on that a little bit? Okay.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay.
And I love when you jump in and you have more information to add to everything. I think it really helps.
It's cool.
It helps me. It helps the audience.
Yeah. And also we have to, for those who have co-ops in your local area, please start to support the co-ops, the local co-ops that are starting to do, it's called bio. You'll notice on some of the fruit and vegetables, they call it biological goods. You'll see it like lettuce, and now they're starting to grow things indoors, hydroponics that they're using with fish. I love the new systems that they're doing. When I decide to create the sanctuary, I'm also going to add hydroponics, working with, composting of fish and incorporating that along with growing my goods. So I would suggest contacting co-ops that are now building their and farming indoors with the biological crops, and starting to support them so that they're able to create more mass production, and they're able to be supported financially while they're doing this to allow for fresh, healthier goods for yourself. So start to look into those co-ops that are doing that now. There's more and more. Arizona, I know they're starting to do that more and more because your community is really awake. Your community is really, I will say Arizona is one of the states. Arizona is a very progressive state.
Yeah.
San Diego is another wonderful. Washington State, big up to Washington State, Seattle, Washington, also North Carolina, Georgia starting to really get into this, starting to build indoors biologically, utilizing the sun rays, obviously, but doing coverage of their goods during the growing process. I really respect them and I support them 1,000%, and we should start to follow suit.
I agree. I'll second that.
Yeah.
The last thing that I really wanted to go into is the vaccine. And I know I've been kind of throwing in little teasers for people here and there. I talked to a lot of people, and it's a hot topic, and I know that you've even talked about it here and there on your show.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that New York made changes to their exemptions and California did. And I just became aware about Washington. And again, I'm coming from having lived in Washington for about 10 and a half years. And so as of May 10th, they passed a law that you can no longer use personal exemptions to avoid the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella immunization. Wow. And they say, for, you know, there are, I'll change subject there. And so the vaccines really hit home for me because I remember when Abigail was 4 and she had her vaccines, and I think around 4 years old they usually do the DTaP perhaps. I can't remember. And so that seemed to trigger her to really go over the top with her symptoms. Yeah. And my daughter Adeline, she had an even worse reaction when she was about 6 months old after she had her vaccine. I can't remember which one it was, but she stopped. So when babies develop, they crawl and then they learn to like roll onto their, they usually learn to roll on their belly and then crawl. And so she was progressing how she should be. Yeah. And then she just stopped being able to do that. And she started becoming, we called her Scooter. She was like scooting on her bottom everywhere. And then around that time too that kind of leads into when she started having the pains and everything. But she lost the ability to go on her belly, and she lost the ability to like pull herself up. And it really stuck out to me because I had pictures of her being able to go on her belly and almost crawling, and then her totally not being able to do that. And I was taking care of a lot of kids at that time, and I used to document everything really, really well. So I could clearly see that happen. And that's when I kind of became a little skeptical about the vaccines, and especially when Abigail had her diagnosis, I became more skeptical and I started looking into that. Well, being that Washington is now making it so that you have to have this MMR vaccine, you know, minus the fact that yes, you can still use a religious exemption or a medical exemption. I also saw in the SanCan Sun News, like I mentioned earlier, that they're really pushing for the same exact thing. And I understand that there's a measles outbreak going on, and there's a lot of hype around that. But when they start writing about there's no connection between autism or all these other things and the vaccinations, it just drives me nuts because I've heard from so many people, and it's all anecdotal, these stories, but I mean, there are kids that their autism gets worse, or they just develop autism as a result, or they get sick, or they no longer can do things like they were doing, or maybe they have a disability all of a sudden, or, you know, the worst of the extreme, or maybe someone dies. And so I think about those things, and I'm like, okay, what's going on with these vaccines? And so I know that a lot of medical institutions and schools are really kind of pressuring parents to get these vaccines for the kids. Yeah. And I think back and I go, okay, so I had one daughter, Abigail, that was actually born in a birthing center in a hospital, and the other two were at my house. Okay. And the one that was in the birthing center at the hospital, as soon as she was born, they gave her a Hep B vaccine. Like, wait, was it Hep B? I'm just trying to remember. I gotta look. It was, it was
yes,
Hep
yes,
B.
it is. Yes, it's that's the one they pressured mothers to do.
So as soon as you give birth, you're sitting there, you know, you're exhausted, you're trying to take the baby. And, I mean, I'll make a little aside, but like they even go to like wash the babies right away, which I don't think is a good idea. No. And so on. But I mean, to put that vaccine in, it is traumatized. So you're washing the baby right away, which is not natural.
No.
That's one way of traumatizing. And then you're doing these vaccines, which is another way of traumatizing. And then if we go into what's in these vaccines, that's also really not good for the babies. And I don't know, and I don't think that a lot of people are aware of this. And I want to make people aware because not you, but people get told. I have a friend that was telling me a story, and I've personally experienced this myself, so I can also attest to this kind of story where she was put in a situation and given an ultimatum, either that she gets the vaccine for her daughter or she would be denied services from this medical facility.
They can do that.
And
yes.
This is someone that just went through something very traumatic with her daughter. Her daughter had, I want to say it was 2 open.
Hello? Wait, hold on. You just cut out.
Her daughter, and I'm not sure if she was just curious, if she really wanted to meet it. I don't know all the details.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gail. You just went out for a minute. Can you repeat what you said? She just went through something traumatic. You cut out for just like a couple seconds. So the last thing we heard is she just was traumatized. The mother was being bombarded to vaccinate her child, and you said she just was traumatized. That's what we heard last.
Oh, yeah. So she had just gone through something very traumatic with her daughter. And I want to say it was either 1 or 2 open heart surgeries that her daughter had just gone through. And she was curious if she could get an exemption for her daughter for the vaccine.
Okay.
And that didn't count as a reason for a medical exemption. And when I heard the story, keep in mind, I have my own personal stories, and I've been through this too. I've gone to a conventional place, and they say either you do this or you don't get our services. I personally had that done to me too.
Me too.
And my heart just kind of went out to this person and just out to anyone else that's ever gone through this, because that isn't how it should be. I mean, it should be a choice.
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, to give a baby, as soon as they're born, a vaccine, and then the way that the vaccines are clustered, I mean, if we go to the CDC.gov vaccine schedule, we see that at 2 months old, they're getting the rotavirus, they're getting the DTaP, the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccine, they're getting the influenza type B vaccine, they're getting the, I don't even know how to pronounce it, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, they're getting the inactivated polio virus. Like, that's too much for a 2-month-old, in my opinion. And I'm saying in my opinion, there might be people that are totally fine with this. But I'm not, and I think that when parents hear that and they think about it, that's a lot. And I wanted to put out there that a lot of parents don't realize, because especially if you go to a conventional place, they won't do this. But if you seek out a naturopathic practitioner, you can get those spaced out. So even if you do want the vaccines, because vaccines, if we just think about it, I mean, it's a good thought in that, okay, we don't want to get these sicknesses and we would like to avoid them. So if we go from that angle, then it's still my opinion that we shouldn't have them clustered. And if someone knows better, that person could seek out somebody that could do them maybe once every 6 months, not 5 of them at once, or 4 of them at once, or 3 of them at once. That's all a lot. And people don't realize that they have the ability to do that. They totally can do that. There are people out there that will do that, but they don't seek that out. And I just wanted to make sure that people hearing the show knew that, because it's just so, in my opinion, important. And I don't think that we should be traumatizing our kids by doing that many. And it would most likely come out to be that there's some money connected to that is making them want to do so many at once.
Yes, Big Pharma would be it.
And it's not for the child's best interest, it's for someone else's interest. And I'm trying to think if there are other things I want to say. And so I wanted to also get into the chemicals in the vaccine. So I did a little homework, and I went to the the Children of God for Life website, again, I mentioned earlier. And again, I'm not saying I'm pro-life or not pro-life. You know, in my opinion, I'm like, okay, let's go case by case on the abortion and stuff. But these vaccines contain aborted fetal matter. And this is, unlike the food where maybe it's questionable, you know, is it still in the end product? These are in it. And it's absolutely in it. So if you go to the vaccine excipient and media summary, which is on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention website, it's in their 13th edition. It was released October 2018. You can go on and cross-reference these as well as others that aren't on this list. And they go on to say that there's the adenovirus that has it, the MMR.
That's right.
And I'm noticing, just a little aside, but I'm noticing that there's this big push for the MMR vaccine, and I'm seeing it here in Arizona. It just occurred in Washington. It's occurring in New York, California. What is going on with this MMR? That's a big question mark for me, because I'm like, is there some kind of agenda? Like, I don't know.
I mean, to be honest.
But then there's the MMR with the varicella.
Yeah.
And, you know, the list goes on. There's polio, hepatitis A, hepatitis A, B, shingles, rabies, smallpox. And it lists the companies too. And so I went onto that excipient media summary sheet, and it says here, like, I'll give an example of the adenovirus. It says human diploid fibroblast cell culture strain WI38. So I'm like, well, what is that? So I go and look that up. And it's the lung tissue of aborted baby fetus cells.
Oh my God.
And so I saw that one. And I mean, that's what it is. It's in there as one of those
crazy
extras. And that's not to mention, you know, in that one, there's MSG, there are those dyes and colors you want to avoid, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so then, I was looking at some other ones, like, for instance, the DTaP, because the DTaP seemed to be a problem for my kids. And again, one of them, like the one that's by Quadracell, has MRC-5 cells. Well, what in the world is MRC-5 cells?
Yeah.
So I got to looking that up. And that, again, is lung tissue of an aborted baby fetus cell. So I'm like, okay. So I'm putting the cells of an aborted baby fetus, the lung tissue, into my child when I get my vaccine.
Wow.
I mean, it's right there. It's like clear as day. And then that's, again, not to mention there's formaldehyde in there and aluminum and a bunch of other stuff.
And let's add just a little bit of spirituality to this, because you're taking a child that has been taken off this earth by choice, and you're putting that in a living child that has been chosen to come in. There's something a little spiritually diabolical about that. There's something a little imbalanced about that.
I would agree with that.
And we got to say, putting the light, putting something dead in something that's freshly new and alive. There's just for the same reason that even in Jewish culture they don't mix dairy with meat of the mother, because the baby's cow milk should be mixed with the mother's milk. You know, the milk that's actually meat of the mother. I mean, there's a reason why we don't do things spiritually. There's certain things that we're supposed to uphold. On a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, and that to me is it's atrocity. It's just an atrocity in itself. And we got to take in consideration, Gail, who are these aborted fetuses? Because I know when women go and get abortions, they don't give them permission to take at least they don't think they're signing away their aborted children's bodies, remains. I don't know one woman, and I know, they cut her off. Hold on. Gail, they cut me off. Okay, hold on. Wow. That was interesting. I think we went too far. They cut me off as soon as I said that. Wow. Okay, so we knew this would happen. They do it close. Let me call back in. Gail's probably still on. Allow Gail to talk while I call in. Let's see.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Enter your host pin. When finished, press the pound key.
I was cut off the feed again.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Please enter your host PIN. When finished, press the pound key.
Your show now, press 1 to hear important instructions.
Appears you're calling back into a live show. We are reconnecting you now.
Oh, Gail, I'm sorry, Gail. You didn't even know, Gail. They had cut me off. I was cut off for a while. I'm glad you were still talking because I was cut off.
Oh, dear. Well, hopefully people heard.
Yes, I hope they heard you.
Awesome.
So good.
Welcome back.
Continue.
Glad you're back.
As soon as I mentioned the aborted fetus and the spirituality, they cut me right off. But that's okay, because can't stop, won't stop. You were continuing. This is why we have mothers on shows.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is. So continue what you were saying, Gail. It's okay with me.
So I'll just reiterate that when mothers, parents, whomever's bringing their child for vaccine go to these conventional and even naturopathic doctors, they don't, as far as I know, unless something has suddenly changed in the last 2 years, 3 years, they don't hand you this list, this vaccine excipient and media summary list. They'll hand you what might happen and some of the possible side effects. But I was talking to one of my friends, and her daughter was screaming for like a month after getting the vaccine. And yes, and I remember too, Abigail, I remember when she was 4, and she was screaming a bunch too. So this isn't going over well. And then the other thing is that even if somebody wants to still get the vaccine, knowing this information, I never, ever, ever have heard of anyone getting offered a moral option.
No.
And what I mean by that is that there are options to opt out of it, supposedly. And I've never heard of anyone being offered a moral option. Have you?
I haven't either. No. Absolutely not.
And so apparently there are moral options that exist for rabies, polio, cystic fibrosis, rheumatoid arthritis, shingles, and smallpox vaccination.
Okay.
And it's not available for the measles and mumps. Now, interesting enough, I'm going to say this again, it's not available. Oral options are not available for the measles and mumps.
Why?
The same vaccine that's being
Push.
promoted.
Yeah, why?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm mentioning it because it seems a little odd to me. But I also want to make people aware, especially those mothers bringing their kids for their vaccine, that if you still want to get those vaccines, there are moral options for the ones I listed above.
That's right.
But again, why are they not for measles and mumps? Why do we have to have both of those different lung tissues from aborted baby fetuses in our vaccination? And I would love to hear what you want to say about this.
I think, we've got to take into consideration they've been trying to chip children. Also, there might be some microchipping involved in this because of the big push. I always think, whenever it's not rational and it's not coming from a disposition of being a help, rather it's a hindrance. And we know, I come from an age where people got measles and mumps and we survived. I had chicken pox. I was fine. My mother had measles. My father
I had chicken pox too.
Yeah. What is the big deal about getting something? I mean, when AIDS and all these other things came out, they weren't trying to give people security or trying to quarantine people. I didn't see them doing that, right? But now we have something that isn't life-threatening. I mean, it isn't enough people dying from it where you would say, okay, this is an epidemic. It's something quite slight. I'm not saying that there isn't any mortality rate going along with it, but what I'm stating is that it's not enough to put up so much scare and put so much promoting of it. It makes you think that there's an agenda, and I personally think they're chipping people, children unbeknownst, because they're asking people, grown people who already had the vaccination, to be re-vaccinated. They're asking some people to do that. And they're fining people in New York to $2,500 or something like that, or go into isolation.
I saw that.
That's crazy.
Yes, I sent you that article too that I found.
Yep.
That is crazy.
That's
And
madness.
my family's in New York. I have a sister that's pregnant in New York. And I'm like, what?
You've never heard anything like that over
crazy.
measles.
This is crazy.
Measles, something that people get, and they get an immunity for it. And let's also take this. Let's backtrack and take this in consideration. From being in the holistic and naturopathic and herbalistic community, I also understand and understand that when a mother and father have been vaccinated, their children automatically have antibodies, basically vaccinating the children that the mother gives birth to. Now, many studies have been done in Europe, not in the United States of America, because, of course, in the States, they won't give us this access to this information and this research. But according to certain, to the Switzerland medical research, I think, no, was it in Switzerland? No, I think it was in Switzerland. Yeah, it was in Switzerland. There were a couple studies done, and it showed that the immunity that of parents that was...
I'm starting to lose you. I can't hear a word you're saying.
Oh,
it's all really crackled, if you can hear me.
Oh, wow, of course. I can hear you clearly.
We must have hit something that they don't want us talking about.
Of course, we hit a chord here.
I don't know if you can still hear me. I'm still here, though.
I can hear you. I
don't hear you one bit.
Carlos is saying they're messing with the feed. I can hear you. I can't hear, you guys can't hear me. Is that what it is?
I've totally lost you if you can still hear me.
Okay, so hold on. I'm gonna take this off. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me? They're messing with the feed. Okay. Hold on. Hold on, family. They're messing with the feed. I'm going to do this again. Let's see if I can do something different. I'm going to hang up. Okay? I'm going to leave Gail on. Hold on. Okay.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Please enter your host PIN. When finished, press the pound key.
To start your show now, press 1.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now.
I see you saying I lost you 3 minutes ago.
Okay, Gail,
I'm on the phone. I can't hear them.
Can you hear me?
There you are. There you are. Now I got you.
Okay. Can you hear me clearly now?
Oh, wait. Let's see. You're there.
Can you hear
now
me?
I can, yes.
Perfect. I think they tried to block that information out, which can't stop, won't stop. We will.
And I totally missed what you said, so I don't know if...
Okay. So what I said is that they did...
To hear that or not. I didn't get to hear it.
There were independent researchers in Switzerland that had found out that the parents' immunity was passed along to the children, meaning that if your parents were vaccinated, your parents have created antibodies. Those antibodies were then passed along to the fetus, and that fetus had an immunity to those same viruses that you were given vaccinations for previous to even conceiving a child. So they've done studies showing that the children have the immunity of the parents, and if we were proactive in doing something to make sure children weren't being immunized for things that are unnecessary, why aren't these studies being done here, or why aren't we hearing about them? Because and even working in heredity, I also know that if I vaccinate a mouse and I have 2 mice that have a certain kind of disposition of having antibodies for a specific type of virus, I also know that the most likelihood of their offspring is to have the same immunity as the parents. It's for my own
90 seconds.
And that's awesome information, because I didn't know that, and I bet most of our audience didn't even know that.
It's crazy, because they don't want anyone to know that, because if we told you that you and daddy being vaccinated means your children have antibodies and they basically have an immunity for those same viruses that daddy and mommy were vaccinated for, Big Pharma wouldn't have a job. Big Pharma wouldn't have this wonderful conglomerate of drug pushers who go in doctors' offices paying a crap load of money to get paid for basically chemicalizing our children.
I am so glad you said that. I had no idea that was the case. And so if we look at how they're pushing this MMR, I mean, it has to be either they're doing something to try to get money, or they're trying to put something in our kids
Yes.
because it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. It has no rationality.
We totally don't even need to worry about those things if it gets passed to our kids.
Absolutely. And that's why even when you go to most surgeons and doctors, if you have private conversations with them, majority of them are not even vaccinating their own children. So why would the same doctors who will push and convince a mother,
10 seconds,
even sometimes to tears in the office, because I've seen mothers crying, being bullied in offices by nurses and doctors, telling them that they need to vaccinate their children or their children may die. Are those same doctors are the same doctors that are not vaccinating their children? I'm not saying all, but there's a big number of doctors that don't vaccinate their children. The same pediatricians that push drugs and pharmaceutical on you.
This whole thing that is crazy in my mind, and that's exactly what triggered me to come on to your show, was seeing all this going on and having a personal experience with my kids. And I mean, we're not even getting into also the other kinds of things that are in there, like there's thimerosal in the vaccines and so much more. I mean, like I was kind of mentioning the formaldehyde and
Yeah.
I mean, there's egg proteins or egg proteins in there. It's just, or used to make them, I think. I can't remember how it is, but
I mean, and with
I'm definitely, the audience has to say and ask about this. Hopefully we'll have some call-ins about this.
absolutely. For anyone who's on the line, I forgot to give them anyone who has any questions, please push the number 1. We don't have a lot of callers because I forgot to remind them. So for the callers that are there, if you have a question, push the number 1. And I can also call in some people via, because this is a personalized group. We got Patreon and we have Cypher in here. Push the number 1 if you have questions on the chat. Just make sure you ask your questions in the chat, and I'll read them off for Gail. And anyone, push the number 1 if you have a question and you want to ask a question it's a lot. It's a lot for everyone to take in, and I think a lot of times in having this conversation, it really puts a little fear in people because like I said, we've been mothers, and I've sat in an office and told them, you aren't putting another pin in my child, and them tell me I was not welcome back at that doctor's office. Myself and my children weren't welcome to go back to their practice based on the fact that I was choosing to omit further vaccination of my children. So I remember that feeling, and I have compassion for any mother who's ever stood up, even in adverse situations when you've been bullied or you're being basically told that you're a bad parent for not upholding to their system of chemicalizing your children. You have a right to bring healthy children in this world. You have a right to have a say in what and who and what goes into your child. And if you do not want to vaccinate them, but you are proactive in keeping them healthy, you're a type of parent that believes in herbalism and basically healing your child from other things, I think that you should have the free will and the free ability to say no to whatever they want to pump your children with. And it's the same way that they want to circumcise little boys right after they come out of the womb. That's another form of abuse. There are mothers who opt to circumcise their sons later, and I don't get into that because some mothers want to do it, but I will say, mothers, you are not being forced. You should not be forced to circumcise your son. If that's a personal choice you're going to make, you do not have to do it the day your son is born. You do not have to do that. That is your personal choice. Do not ever feel forced by anyone to do that. And that should be a conversation you have with your husband or your partner before you're giving birth to your child. But little boys are being traumatized directly after birth, and you wonder how that trauma shows up in them later on. It's abusive. It's abusive. No child should be having to undergo operations right after they're freshly born. That's sick, and I think that's a form of trauma that's being perpetrated in this matrix to cause our little men to be traumatized from little boys. So that's another thing I think some of you moms and dads need to have conversations previous to giving birth, because that's something I know mothers who've gotten their sons circumcised a little later, not the first day. You don't have to do that. You can opt to do it at another time. If that's something you feel important to to do, then by all means you may be able to do that, but you don't have to do it right away. Same with vaccinations.
And I agree with you. I had a naturopathic doctor, the same one that helped me with my home birth. And I remember with my son, Jesse, it was one of those things. She's like, oh, well, are you going to do circumcision? And I'm like, oh yeah, he's a boy. Let me think about that.
Yeah.
And then I felt like, I'm like, no, I don't want that. But then some people get, and even I got that pressure from certain people, like, oh, well, we've all been circumcised and such, but I just went with my gut, and I was like, no. And I was given options, though, with the natural, which was awesome. I was given the option that even if I had wanted to, and she even said, she's like, you don't do it immediately, like wait at least a week. So it's good that you're bringing this up, because again, if there are women that are pregnant with boys out there, and they're don't know that they do have options.
You don't
oftentimes we do get pressured.
Yes. And also, I think, did you get offered in the hospital? I know that when I gave birth to my second daughter, they were pushing for me to get some sort of vaccination for myself when I just was giving birth. I forgot what it was, and I've never heard of it previous to this. Was there something they were trying to vaccinate you for while you were in the hospital giving birth? Because I was the weirdest thing in the world. I hadn't heard it with my first daughter. I forgot the vaccination, and I've never heard anyone get this option. So I almost felt, I was paranoid already. I was like, no, you're not pumping me. I'm breastfeeding. Why would I want to put a chemical in me that will further cause my child to be traumatized? But there was something they were offering me of the day I went into labor. They offered a vaccination, and I've never heard anyone be offered a vaccination the day you give birth. For myself.
So no, I don't recall being offered a vaccination with Abigail, and then again, the other two were home births, so nothing was done. No vaccinations were done for, I think, at least 2 weeks. And with my kids, once I started realizing about Abigail's autism and Adeline's issues and such, I stopped vaccination. So Abigail does have most of her vaccinations. Adeline only has half, and my son Jesse only has up until a few months old.
Good.
And then by that point, that's where this whole journey started. Yeah. And just a little aside, that like my son Jesse has grown up eating wheat, dairy, corn, soy, and egg-free almost his whole life, other than the Gerber baby food that we realized didn't serve him well.
Wow.
So he's growing up pretty
healthy.
I mean, minus the few vaccines in the beginning in it. He's, in my opinion, pretty healthy.
Yeah, because you were already at that stage of totally omitting everything. That's so wonderful, though. It was a journey for you to go through that, but it's wonderful because he benefited from the changes you had already made for the other babies and yourself. So he totally got the third baby.
Yeah.
Actually got the wonderful the remakeover, the eating remakeover, and it benefited him. And he's a male, which is fantastic, because males tend to be very sensitive towards chemicalization much more than females, with the metals and the different their endocrine system tends to hold on to chemicals more. Yeah.
Yes, I remember when I was reading about the autism and ADHD and such when I first started off about 4 years ago. Yeah. And I remember reading time and time again that they were saying that the boys were more susceptible. And I don't really still understand why, but I think you just explained it.
Yeah.
They hold on. And so I was very, very worried about my son Jesse. And I feel really confident now that he's going to be fine. Like he is fine. He's full of energy. He doesn't have any rashes. He's very intelligent. So I feel so much better about having gone on this journey. And it's like now I know. And also I can empower other women and even men. If men come to talk to me, I don't really get too many men talking to me about this. But, I can empower people.
Definitely. And there's a lot of
about
dads,
all of this.
Yeah, there's a lot of dads who can benefit, because there's a lot of single dads also who don't necessarily talk about it publicly, but I've heard them on the back lay, and they've almost felt like they were being bullied because they were men. So you have these nurse practitioners acting as if they weren't competent parents, as a male coming in. They're used to the moms coming in and doing all the vaccinations and all the, the weighing of the babies. But sometimes fathers don't speak up, and I want to definitely allow for the fathers to have a voice in this. I know it's very hard sometimes when you're the main caretaker and you feel a lot of times they make you as males feel incompetent to be able to make these strong, stringent decisions in avoiding these chemicalizing vaccinations. So we want to definitely stand by our males who are there, who are advocates for their children, and we definitely want to lend our assistance to you as well. So don't ever feel like you can't talk to someone like Gail or myself or other C-stars who are in those same predicaments, but again, as a male, you may be stigmatized and they may have a different approach as to, judging you when you decide to maybe opt out of some of these vaccinations.
Well, that's what I find is actually the males that I do talk to they seem, from my perspective, to be in a little bit of fear, and then also to be like, oh, well, I was told this, I was raised this, so I do this.
Yeah.
And kind of breaking out of that is very challenging. But once they're informed and they're given information, slowly, I've seen them change. The ones I've spoken to, and again, not many, it's usually women.
Absolutely. And it's necessary. Again, it's not usually they're not generally in those positions, but when they are, it's good for them to hear these shows because then they can feel empowered and like, okay, they didn't know this, now they know, and they're coming with more validation for how they felt, maybe not being comfortable to vaccinate their sons or daughters and what have you. And I will even say, when I was pregnant with my, I didn't have the baby, I had an accident, but I was pregnant with a boy. The one thing that I did notice throughout that pregnancy is that I was not able to eat from any metals. That was very interesting. It was the first time I've ever had that in a pregnancy, but it was the first boy that I was ever pregnant with. I was not able to eat anything with metal, not a fork, not a spoon. That's where my adversity came from, metals, even pots. Anything cooked in a pot, I couldn't touch. So it's interesting that my own body was already preparing to expel metals naturally from holding a male in my womb. So I thought that was very interesting, and I also want to bring that up for any women who are having those feelings, and so you're not crazy. It's your body actually, the little baby inside of you is saying, that's not good for me, mommy. I don't want any metals. And that's where you get these adversities from. So I'm just putting that out there as well. That's what made me convert to glass, clay, and bamboo pots and dishes.
And alongside the metals, too, I do think that a lot of people are carrying a lot of metals in their bodies, and that is probably wreaking havoc as well.
Absolutely.
And we could see that with the autism ADHD diagnosis. We can also see that with what I went through. I mean, the mercury exposure and probably everything else I was ever exposed to, and it just all hit me at once. And then the stress of trying to heal my kids, and there were a lot of challenges on that journey. I mean, it wasn't like everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we're all for you changing diets." That was really, I was alone a lot. I think my naturopathic doctor and I were probably tag teaming, but it was very, very challenging. And I do a lot of natural ways of detoxing. I go and maybe just drink water and a fruit smoothie and eat fruit like half the day before I even get into really eating. And I do a lot of things like dulse and wheatgrass and wheatgrass juice. And what's the other one I do? I do spirulina. There's some other ones I do for detoxing. I can't remember right now. I'll do the barley grass juice sometimes.
Yeah, to clear out.
I want to say there's more, but I can't think of them right now off the top of my head.
Yeah. It's important to do chelation every once in a while. I think it's good. I always suggest to mothers, especially boys, who have any of the spectrum, on the spectrum of autism, I always say to clay. Clay is another thing I say is phenomenal. I clay my daughters.
Wow.
Yeah, clay.
Yes.
Clay is a form of chelation. And claying them from the root to the tutor, from their head to their feet, will help to pull some of those metals out and detox them. I do it with my youngest because she has more of a skin issue. and it has to do with all these fibers and things coming from the sky and also the sun exposure. So that's a form of chelation too. So the claying is phenomenal for the little ones. And they love to do it. Little ones like to be in the dirt anyway. They like the mud, and they like to do things.
Yeah, my son loves being in the dirt. He's always digging holes.
Yeah, they love it. So when you say you're going to clay them, I find that all the babies are usually very receptive. Children love it. So I think that's also a good way to keep your children and yourself balanced. And chelation you should do once a month because we're being exposed to a multitude of types of metals coming out of the sky aerial-wise. I think it would only be beneficial if you chelate yourself once a month by, like Gail said, doing maybe drinking water and eating fruit. Also maybe doing claying and doing some forms of pulling with spirulina and other things that will help clear out the metals out of your system. That would be helpful.
I also do a lot of salt baths, and my kids love them. We'll get like 4 different salts. We'll have like Dead Sea salt and Epsom salt, and we'll have some lavender in there, and they really love it. And I find it really helps them if they're getting a little agitated or something's going on, or maybe they're exposed to something. You know, just put them in the salt bath. And even for me too, if I know I've been maybe cross-contaminated or someone's bothering me with whatever's coming out of the sky, and right now sometimes I get itchy, I'll get headaches when that goes on. I go in the salt bath and it helps immensely. And so I was just curious, as I know that you do a lot of cleaning, have you found that the salt baths also kind of have the same effect?
Yes, I think that's phenomenal. I think salt baths are a necessity, even daily. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I do salt baths and also I do baking soda baths. So, yeah, I agree. The salt is something clearing. It actually helps to defrag and mute any of these agitants. I think that's the best thing. You gave the best ingredients. A salt bath can clear, and it mutes. It just does it beautifully. It's like that's why if you don't have a beach, then you take a salt bath. Because really, back in the days, our ancestors used to go to the beach. And if you notice, they're herding people away from the shores. Back in the days, you go sit, even if you lied on the beach in the sand or buried yourself in sand, that's a form of clearing. So I think salt baths are beneficial to the highest degree.
And I just lost you.
No, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I hear you.
Okay.
And I was thinking about how, like my daughter Abigail, when she really, her energy's all over, when she goes outside and helps with the garden or puts herself in the dirt, that really helps to ground her. And the kids, they know what's good for them. When my daughter has some really intense dream or something really prophetic or something, I'll take her to the park in the sand, and I know you and I have talked about this too another time, and that seems to help her a lot. It's
beautiful.
That grounding, and a lot of kids are spending a lot of time indoors for one reason or another, and even the schools, they have very limited time outside. I mean, yes, they're getting a little bit more time outside than maybe in the past, but it's still limited compared to how much they could be outside. So it becomes challenging for them to ground themselves. So, and they know they want to be out there.
They do. All healthy children want to be out there, and we don't even add the component. Another nasty ingredient is electromagnetic low ELF waves coming from the computers and from cell phones. So by allowing children to stay inside and stay on computers and stay around Wi-Fi, that isn't helpful to their endocrine system either, and that's damaging, and we won't even know how that affects them until they're in their 20s and 30s. So I think let the children go and play outside. Let them get dirty. You know, they will only be dirty for so long. Let them go play in the dirt. Let them dig for worms. Let them go and chase, the squirrels. Let them be outside. It is the healthiest form of interaction. It's healthy for their mind, body, and spirit, and it keeps them away from electronics that can eventually cause more harm than good. I think the electronics, we don't even get into that conversation with the host of vaccinations and metals. We don't even take how that interaction alchemically works with you having tons of metals in your body from vaccinations and then you using an electronic device that uses magnetic energy as well. How is that interfacing with you? And how does that affect your system or your biosphere? That's another component that we
Well,
need to take that into.
that's a really great question to pose to the audience. And I know for me, I am electromagnetic sensitive. Like, it really bothers me. If there are 5 laptops going in my house, I can't focus. It really irritates me. And I actually, because of you, I actually wear a diode on me.
That's
and
right.
I have diodes around
right.
my house. And thank you to you, because you're the one that introduced me to that, because I didn't know what to do. And you helped me a lot. So maybe you can just share with the audience how they can help themselves if they are electromagnetic sensitive, because I know for sure I am.
Yes. Well, there's definitely different modalities that you can use. A diode is number one. There is a site, I think I'll plug it into, I'll put it inside of the, I think it's called Polar. The C-stars know the name of it.
It's energy.
Energy polar.
Energy polarity.
There you go. Energy polarity.
Energy polarity. It's like ener and then a dash G and then polar and then like polar and then the letter T.
Yes. There's a host of wonderful things called diodes. They help to mute and to diffrag some of the electromagnetic low ELF waves that come through via your cell phones, your electronics in your household, your televisions. It doesn't stop it totally, but it helps to mute at least 75 to 90% of it, so that you're not interacting with energy that is causing free radicals to go and create all kinds of havoc in your body. Now, they have different forms. Like myself, I utilize every cell phone, my little ones, if they have a cell phone, they have a diode on the back of their phone each. I also put a blue field blocker on my phone, so that if you have Mogellans, the fibers, the nanofibers coming from the sky and going underneath your skin, in order to keep them from replicating or interacting with you in an unhealthy way, you can put a blue shield blocker on your phone, which you can get on Amazon for like $9, $8. It is very necessary for you to make sure you're proactive in being responsible for utilizing your electronics with care, because your children are being exposed to that and yourself, and it does cause, there's a lot of people suffering from all forms of cancer that are coming out of the blue that normally 20, 30 years ago you didn't hear about. Some of this has to do with the interaction of our body, which is a majority of water, interacting with low ELF waves coming out of your cell phone. So diodes, wearing them on your body, they have a host of them. They sell them. They're not very expensive. I know surgeons who have them on their phone. I know when the Japanese were going through the whole issue with Fukushima, it was Dr. Blair who said, get this diode board. They don't even sell it anymore. It was called the transmutation board. All the Japanese bought out most of the diodes and the transmutation board to help to relieve some of the radiation out of their foods, out of the stuff they were using. So this is a wonderful site. It's been verified by Dr. Blair, who I actually studied under, who's passed, rest in power to Dr. Blair, who was a master metaphysician. It works. It's great for yourself. It keeps, Gail just stated, at least she's more grounded. She doesn't have that overwhelming of being bombarded by electromagnetic energy pulsing in and out of her via her electronics. Be responsible with the things you use. It's okay to have electronics, but electronics shouldn't be something that's causing you harm. It should be something that's helping you, not harming you. Okay?
Yes, and FleurBrun, I just need to step away for 2 minutes.
Yes, go right ahead.
So bear with me. I'll just need to take a quick 2-minute break.
No, go right ahead. So listen, family, I love that we're having this conversation, and remember, this is only to help and assist you. Take what you need, put it in the archive, and or extend this to other mothers, grandmothers, people that may not be in the aware community, may not even be aware that these things are things that their children are being exposed to, what they're being exposed to. I think if you can possibly extend that, you could possibly save a mother or father the issues that may come about from being overexposed to vaccinations that aren't very helpful to a child, or the over-vaccination of children in such a close proximity of time. Being able to be proactive in knowing which vaccinations have aborted fetuses, which is insane to me, because I don't know any woman who's ever had an abortion who consciously knew that she was donating her own DNA to be placed in vaccinations. And also, you got to take in consideration whose DNA is being put inside you, because we're all very different. So they're taking specific type of DNA and they're putting that in each one of these vaccination vials, and they're putting it in your children. Okay, you can have crazy people who have DNA in that vaccination. You wonder why your child is acting like someone who's possessed. Okay, there is a spiritual consequence for doing these things, and I think we have to take note of this. What else did we discuss? Just being, again, aware. I love the salt baths. I forgot to even add that. Gail said salt baths. That's a wonderful thing. Put the babies in a bath. And my little girls, I put them in, a lot of times with baking soda. They used to lick the baking soda, which is good for them. It helps to kick up the alkalinity, but also it's an anti-carcinogen. During people who have chemo, they always have a port, and in that port, they usually have biocarbonate, which is a form of baking soda, before they put the chemo inside the port that goes inside the body. So that's a form of, it's an anti-carcinogen, and there's a couple of doctors who talked about baking soda being something to heal cancer, and that taking doses of it can also kill the fungus, because cancer in itself is a fungus. And shown under the microscope, you see cancer look like a mushroom, okay? And fungus can be killed by upping your alkalinity, okay? So those are things to, I hear Gail. I think Gail's back on.
Yes, I'm back. Yes.
Yeah. So I was just kind of recapping over everything and just talking about the importance of sharing this information with those who are less privy and may not even know that vaccinations have these things in it, or, the options that they have. I didn't even know there was an option. You're telling me they had a healthy option. There hasn't been a nurse or a doctor who's ever said to me as a parent, well, listen, I know you don't ethically find this reasonable to vaccinate your child, but we have alternative healthy vaccinations. I've never heard of that.
And I've never heard of that. Can you imagine if people were actually told that, how much better people would feel, too, to know that they have options, and that even they have options to spread them? I mean, you don't have to have them all at once.
We do not.
And people weren't told that. And it's very difficult to find places that will do that. And so I'm really trying to just make people aware, and to kind of tie that together too is when people are doing all these things like becoming aware of the vaccines and eating better and doing all the things that we've talked about, that their overall awareness will increase, and then they'll also start to see things differently. Yeah. And then they can kind of continue on that journey like you and I have, and they can increase their vibration, so to speak, and help. It can really help them heal. Yeah. So I hope that this will really help people. And I don't know if we have any callers or not. Do we have any callers?
We don't. Because of the time, because it cut off, it shut me out. Our callers.
It's like almost midnight by you.
They normally we have our callers, a host of callers, but because it cut me out at the time that was supposed to do the countdown, we don't have them in there. We have one person in 907. 907, do you have a question? If you do, push the number 1. We only have 907 in there. Push the number 1, 907-0202 if you have a question, and I'll pick up the line. If you don't, I'm not going to pick it up. Yeah, this is, again, I find this interesting because this is a very sensitive topic. This is one of the most sensitive topics. And it's one of the most attacked, a lot of our holistic practitioners, we don't even talk about how many have been killed and murdered based on giving alternatives to people of living different, more holistic way, living a more holistic life. And, there are a bunch of pen-pushing corporate pharmaceutical reps that make a crap load of money off of infiltrating this vaccination field. I've seen them walk in offices. They're well dressed. They look like modern day drug pushers, and they get paid a lot of money every time they give these doctors samples. And if the doctors utilize their medication, the doctors get a nice bonus at the end of the year. We don't even talk about that. the fact that there's incentive on all levels and all layers of the drug pushing. That when doctors take on these samples and they start pushing the same vaccinations, they get a hefty bonus at the end of the year that some of them rely on to help sustain their households. We don't talk about that, you know? But at the end of the day, this is about us sharing for our families and also extending that to other mothers, fathers, grandmothers, nieces, cousins, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers. This is very important for us to have this discussion.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we are having this discussion, and I really, 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 really hope that the people that are listening do share this information with other people and encourage them to listen to what we've talked about or just research for themselves.
Absolutely. So
get educated.
Gail, I want you to give everybody your website, tell them a little bit about yourself. I want you to give some plugs in here. Tell them about your book, where they can purchase your book, if it's an ebook. So you've got the floor.
Okay, well, again, the book's going to come out in the fall, so it isn't quite done yet. I have 101 recipes. I have about 90 of those I have pictures for that I've taken myself.
Sure.
I just met with a photographer today, and we moved things around in my kitchen and took some headshots of me, took some pictures of me in action, and so I'm getting really, really close. I'm just trying to decide if I want to self-publish or if I want to try to find a publisher. Okay. Right now, I'm kind of going along the lines of self-publishing.
Yes,
and I'm just going with the flow. Like everything with the magnetism, everything's coming to me as it needs to, when it needs to.
Yes.
And so I'm just going with it. And like I was kind of mentioning earlier, I want people to use this change of diet as an awakening tool. And my website is rainbowfoodrocks.com. So it's spelled just like the word rainbow, the word food, and the word rocks with an S. .com. The email is info@rainbowfoodrocks.com. That's INFO @rainbowfoodrocks.com. Or you can do Gail @rainbowfoodrocks.com. So if somebody has a question, Gail is spelled Gail. And I would be happy to meet with you. I've had people already just from the community reach out to me, and I've gone and met with them at cafes and what have you to talk about pretty much what we've just talked about. And it's nice to see that people are curious. There are a lot of people that are reading the story on the website and they can empathize, or they see something that like, hey, you did it like this way, and I think that I could replicate that in the deal. And
I love it.
So I know it's inspiring people, and when the book is finished, I will definitely reach out to you so that you can promote it in your community.
Absolutely, absolutely. We want better options for our children. You're doing the work. You actually have the resources, and you take them the pictures, and you're putting it out there. And this is something that's going to be very helpful for a lot of moms who are struggling with finding good, healthy recipes that are egg-free, nut-free, soy-free. You're doing the legwork, and it's helpful because a lot of times there are mothers out here who don't have that time, and they need these recipes. They need to know what to do, and sometimes it's great when another mother has the resources to be able to extend for a mother who may not have the time. I think it's a win-win. So definitely tell me when the book is out. And it'll probably be around the time, hopefully around the time also conference time too. I'd like to purchase a couple of copies and have that available for some of the Sea Star Sun Stars who are coming to the conference.
Oh, that would be fun. When is your conference?
The conference.
I'm interested.
Yeah, the conference is in October. It's going to be in the Bayou. New Orleans, Bayou. We voted on the Bayou. So we're going to be sitting.
And where are you going to post that?
Yeah.
Where are you going to post that?
I'm going to post. It'll be all over. Of course, the first dibs always goes to Cypher, because that's the collective. So Cypher always gets the first dibs of being able to purchase the tickets to go to the event. But it's going to be very small and modest this year. This is about collectively us coming together and fielding our consciousness and building. I think this is very necessary. We're going to have some amazing people showing up. So I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of wonderful people. I met amazing people at last year's conference in Orlando. I'm looking forward to fielding together some wonderful, wonderful liaisons with our family that comes in October. So after I give it the first dibs to Decipher,
So it's in October,
yeah.
And then do you have a date?
We don't. I have a tentative date. I can't put it out there until I never put it out until I give my actual vendor, my actual place. Once I get the place, then the date will be out there. But I went over it with my admin, Selma, so the dates are pretty good. Let's just say it'll be around Halloween time, but it'll be available for mothers because we know a lot of mommies want to come. So we're trying to do it at around the time where it's going to be easy but very festive. We want to make it also festive too, so it'll be really nice.
And how expensive do you think it will be?
Oh, this is going to be inexpensive. I say, well, depending on the vendor, depending on where we're going to have it, it's not like what you would consider to be like a big conference where they spend like $300-400. It'll be something nominal, like $100 or $150. It's not going to be that much this year.
Okay, and then how many days will it be?
Well, I say, everybody wants to spend, I think last time everybody wanted to spend the whole week together. So I think we're going to make it around 3 to 4 days. So a conference will be 1 day. I always say the conference is for 1 day, but we like to do meet and greet and hang out. So we're going to do a couple things that are family friendly on the day before we do the conference. There's a special gathering happening that we're trying to do on the day before the conference as well. I don't want to tell that yet, because that's something really special. And then for over the weekend, we'll do we like to do things together. So we'll probably go to the French Quarters. If people have their children, we'll go meet up and have beignets and cafe au lait. Like the typical, we'll do that. So,
do people show up with their kids?
Yeah, some people can show up. My little ones
do people actually bring their families and stuff?
Yeah, I bring my little ones. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm a Creole woman. I'm all about family. My mother, my father always had parties with family included. We've always been an inclusive group. So for the conference, I say that'll more so be for adults, but the children, I'm not excluding anyone. If people are coming down and staying, I think it's very important for us as mothers to include our little starseeds and to make them meet each other, because sometimes they're lonely too. And the children of us are usually more in sync with each other. So I think the starseeds at this time will be incorporated so that they can chum it up together. You know what I mean? They have cool moms that are really aware. I think it's necessary that we bring them together. So this time we'll have that.
Well, one of my intentions has been building community. I mean, with the new moon that came, I set the intention. I want to build community, especially for my kids, because they have a lot of trouble finding other kids that are like them. I mean, luckily, I've met up with a bunch of really wonderful ladies with the sister circle, but outside of that, it's really difficult to find like-minded families and people to hang around. So I think that's great that you're family-oriented and families can come and the kids can hang out and the kids know, wow, there are other kids like me out there, and
beautiful.
That makes them feel better.
Yeah, and it gives them their own little tribal base too, because if we build a community, if it's how we intended to be more holistic, we would always be inclusive of our offspring. That was something we would always do. The exclusivity is when people exclude their children, a lot of times it's because they're doing something that isn't holistic or isn't healthy. Healthy parents always incorporate their children in some way or another. So I take that stance,
Well, I'm interested. I hope you keep me posted.
Yeah, definitely. But
that would be fun.
I'll definitely have as the day comes closer. I'll definitely have something. I'll have everything tentatively planned. I have to pick the most perfect place because that's just what I have a vision. And as a Sagittarius, that vision has to come to manifestation. So as soon as I take a masterful
it all starts with that vision and setting the intention. So you're on your way.
Yes, it'll be exciting.
And one more thing to add with the cookbook is, the idea with this cookbook is for my daughter to be able to open up the book and look at a picture and go, oh, I want to eat that, and for her to be able to even learn how to do it herself.
I love it.
So she gets older, she knows what to do. So again, families could do that too, if they can open it up and they can go, okay, well, honey, what do you want to eat? And the child, or maybe the husband or the wife or whomever it is, can pick out, and then they can make that.
I love it. I love that.
And they know what it's going to look like.
That's right. That's beautiful. You like I said, a mommy who's done the legwork, and then everyone else gets to enjoy and partake in it. Beautiful. I'm so grateful you joined tonight. I was really excited about the show. I'm really, again, really happy to have met someone like yourself who has been absolutely encouraging to me as a mother as well. So I want to know, just as you feel about me, I feel just as much about you. You've encouraged me and make me see things from a totally different perspective, and allowed me through these discussions with you and talking to you to grow. So I thank you for that.
Thank you also. I'm really grateful to know you and to be your friend and to be able to come on this show. And I've just kind of totally cleared that fear, and now I'm out there.
Yes, honey, yes. This is the first of many. First of many.
Find me out there.
So I thank Gail again for joining us this evening. Thank you for everyone for joining Aquarius Rising Ninth Gate. This is a beautiful show. Again, share this with, those who would benefit from hearing this intel. And again, I'll join you again Thursday night. So thank you, Gail, for coming on in the evening and joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
You have a great night.
Same to you. Peace, peace, Sea Star, peace, Sun Stars. Take care.
Peace.